Yeah.
Good morning, honorable members, distinguished colleagues. Good morning. Good morning. Let's resume our seats. Are there any members in the house yet? Is there any member of parliament who's in the house? There's one. Are you the one? Right. Do you need any facilitation? No, that's okay. Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of our meeting. While we wait for the others to join, I think we can prepare ourselves to be ready for the day. The way we are going to start the day, I need 3 volunteers. The first volunteer I was going to get from parliamentarians. I'll do so when they come. But I need a volunteer from the group of researchers, 1 volunteer. We are not proceeding until I get a volunteer, so you better volunteer first. No, just volunteer. You are not under threat. Your lives are not under threat.
What are the terms of reference?
They shall be known when you have signed up.
Kurasha,
Yes, sir.
what are the terms of reference?
The terms of reference shall be divulged to the persons who would have volunteered. It's like marriage. You start off by signing for a certificate. Okay, I accept your nomination, Lisedi. So could you stand up? Lisedi, please stand up. The other category is CSOs. Can I get 1 more volunteer in line with gender equality? May I get a lady this time because Lisedi has volunteered and is male? No, it's fine. It's fine. Your life is not under threat. There's no need to protest yet. Stand up, Lised. Thank you very much. CSOs, may I have one person, please. CSOs, the CSOs group. CSOs. Thank you very much. I would have wanted a late, but thank you for volunteering. You can also stand. Okay. The more the merrier is fine. You can stand, both of you. No, both of you can stand. I'll be fine with 3 people. I wanted 3. So the issue is we want to recap yesterday, and the way we are going to recap is in terms of the terms of reference, the party you wanted. You tell us 3 things. First one, my head. What is that one thing you didn't necessarily know about, or that will never leave your head or your brain from our interaction yesterday? Then you will follow the same terms of reference. The second part, my heart. What touched your heart from what we did yesterday? And the third, my feet. What is that one thing that you are going to do differently from here, having learned from what we went through yesterday? So my head, my heart, my feet. Do you want to start, Lesedi? Thank you very much.
You know, Mr. Kurasha, you said you wanted researchers.
Remember, researchers and staff of parliaments were together. In any case, the terms of reference are general and would apply to anyone. So we are happy to learn from you.
Ma'am, for women empowerment, I was going to give to one of my sisters from Zambia or Zimbabwe or Lesotho. So the first one is, it says my heart.
My head.
My head. I think in my head, hearing about the impact that the researchers have had in parliaments in terms of influencing awareness and decision-making and action, and galvanizing that action into something tangible in parliaments. I think that will always stay with me, because I've also seen it at parliament when we're really involved. What's in my heart? Is that the next one? Can you explain that one again?
What touched you? That one thing that moved you, or that touched you from?
I think the passion that everybody brought to the table, especially the researchers, having interacted with most of them, whenever they talk, I mean, from Zambia to Zimbabwe to from Lesotho there, you can feel the passion with which they did this thing. And I think at a personal level and at a professional level, should the project even continue, it should be part of those programs at Parliament without necessarily saying, is funding available or not? This is something that parliaments need to focus on and continue doing. And the people, if anybody came in as a research because of the project for our parliament that would have not maybe absorbed them, they should go into the system and form part of that parliamentary workforce without necessarily saying they were project staff. And in terms of my fit, I think going back to Botswana, there was a lot lagging behind. Whether the program continues or not, Parliament of Botswana, at least this team here, we are going to make sure that this thing carries on and integrates with other programs.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Quite insightful. We appreciate your submissions. Madam, can we have you? Your head, your heart, and your feet. And a reminder again, your head is that one thing you may not have known that will be stuck in your head, or something that you picked that will be stuck with you for a very long time. Your heart, what touched you? And your feet, what are you going to do And what are you going to do differently if there is anything like that?
Sorry, one thing that I did not know before coming to the conference.
You found out from the conference. That one thing that even if you had known it, it's going to be stuck in your head, the impression that was made.
I think the one thing that seen it important in this conference, especially when we were in our groups, was the fact that when you share experiences and your lessons, you are like, oh, it is doable. I didn't know, or actually can do this, or when I have a problem, there is one person that I can talk to, even if he is not from my country. I think it was commendable for me, because what I had that was done by Malawi, which was something that we have been deliberating on as the legal profession and other stakeholders at home, was like, oh, we could have taken this route, but we were not aware. So I think that's one thing that I've learned. The other thing that came to my heart, or that is in my heart, is you can't do anything without other people. So collaboration is key for every success, every development, everything, if I may say. The one thing that I'm gonna do differently as I go back home, using the very same collaboration and also based on the presentation made by the researchers, is the fact that we are going to fight with our team. We were talking about it, that we need this lady to be a member of parliament permanently, or be absorbed in parliament. So I think that's one thing we are going to work hard for it, to see that it happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we end with the gentleman who volunteered. Your head, your heart, and your feet.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think in terms of my head, I think during the opening ceremonies, there was a mention that we still have one country in study that has not really joined. And then I was just imagining to say, I think that country is missing a lot. Is it Comoros? It's missing a lot.
Yes, it is.
Because I mean, here we are learning a lot, and the other forums also at study level that are actually development in nature. And I think a lot is being lost in the process. Then I was thinking, is there that we can do maybe to help that they see the need of joining and also benefiting from these initiatives and study PF and other programs also. Then I also learned through the discussions in our groups that there have been a lot of similar efforts in almost all the study countries, including the process on role reform in terms of access to safe abortion. It has succeeded in other countries, Zambia and Mozambique. They have much wider grounds for accessing the same, unlike other countries like Malawi, where we have made some progress. We have a bill, but I think we still have a long way to go in terms of changing the laws. In terms of my heart, the passion itself, I mean, this is a unique grouping, which is actually involving people who have different roles as far as SRHR is concerned in the countries. We have the policymakers here, members of parliament. I'm very encouraged to see the passion that is there. And then we have line ministries here, and then we have CSOs. It is not easy to actually bring these cohorts in one room for advocacy, because in some situations, it's like a cat and rat relationship. You know what I'm trying to mean? It becomes a civil society issue when the politicians think or see that it won't add votes to their sitting, and then they wouldn't support some of the initiatives that we bring on the table. But seeing the passion here and how we are pushing towards one direction, it touches my heart, because I think if this was actually the way to go, with all the members of parliament in our countries, I mean, we would not be struggling with the life skills education or CS, comprehensive sexuality laws, safe abortion laws, and all that. So I wish we would take this further to our team members in our cohorts in our countries. Now, taking home, I also refer to our discussion in our group, whereby I've learned a lot of things to say. There, for example, is it in Zambia? There's a WhatsApp group that involves members of parliament and CSOs. I'm sure I'm right, the Zambian team. Yeah, that's a rare occurrence. In most cases, that wouldn't work because these are different people who think they are actually also trying to expose each other on a negative way. But I think that's something that we can also try in Malawi, and then that's an initiative actually to enhance coordination. And then the MPs being champions on different SRHR issues. I think I also take that home. And then in some countries, we heard that at the initial stage of this program, there were proper terms of reference being signed between CSOs and the parliament, and also members of parliament were actually involved. In our country, in Malawi, we had a gentleman's agreement to say, okay, this is how we proceed. Here is the project, here is the work plan, and this is the law of the members of parliament. This is the law of the researchers. This is the law of civil society members. But I think it was a loose agreement, much as it worked, and we made some good progress. So I've taken that home, and I'm sure we'll actually do best, particularly when we have a second phase of the project or other similar projects that will be there in Malawi. Thank you very much.
We give, yes, we can give our contributors or our volunteers another round of applause. Very illuminating observations, and I think they speak for all of us. It worked out just as well that Lisa, you volunteered, because then the parliamentary side came out clearly in terms of what Parliament would do differently or are going to entrench. We also have the issue of experience sharing being critical. Then, of course, the collaboration also featuring prominently. At this point, I wish to find out if there is anyone with anything burning from yesterday before we proceed with today's program. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Program Director, and morning to everyone. Yesterday, there was a presentation by the last presenter, really, that touched my heart, because in most cases, we find ourselves, implementing programs and not unpacking the components of that program. She made an example of that lady that used to assault the husband with a cooking stick, and thinking that that is not gender-based violence because she's a lady, she has that right to beat the husband. So really, it is important for us to unpack the topics that we give to the community that we're going to work on. Yesterday in our group, I made an example of the way people define abortion. Abortion, there are many types of abortion. And if we don't unpack abortion, if we don't unpack gender-based violence, really, people will, our audience is going to assume, and our projects will not be effective. I wanted to add, I wanted to say something, and unfortunately, you closed the discussion on the feed. Thank you. At a certain, I feel that we need to strengthen collaboration with our stakeholders, especially the line ministries and the civil society organizations, so that the program, continues effectively. That is what I wanted to add, that we actually need to strengthen that collaboration, work together as members of parliament, and ensure that everything is done effectively, support the program from our side as members of parliament through approving the budgets, that is sufficient and making sure that we conduct our oversight role effectively. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Very profound and very interesting, the importance of unpacking some of these concepts. When I went to school many years back, there is what they call emotive use of language, and this usually permeates through the media, where based on their agenda setting, if someone says, what is abortion? Depending on where they stand, someone will say abortion is murder. Then the other one says abortion is elimination of unwanted pregnancy. They are talking about the same thing, but you can clearly see where they're coming from and what agenda they are setting. So it's always important, and often the unpacking and the depoliticization of issues happens when there is dialogue, there is engagement, there is diplomacy, and that's why it's important to start conversations. Even in difficult things, wars are ended by conversations. So it's a fundamental point you're raising, Honorable, and we appreciate the contribution. It has also come to my attention that whereas our sister from Zambia was a loner yesterday and did justice to the sector of funders, we also have a representative from financing institutions, someone from USAID Angola. Is that a correct position? USAID Angola, you're in the room? Yes, we would benefit from you as well, because yesterday, like I said, when we were putting people in groups, maybe because of the issue of language interpretation facilitation, we ended up placing you in a category of group which was different from where you would have been. I want to give you 2 minutes to share your experience in terms of how you have collaborated with the project and how there have been any cross linkages with the other sectors and other stakeholders that you work with as USAID, linking collaborations with Parliament. I will give you the next 2 minutes to just briefly share your experience. So she's going to follow in Portuguese. So channel 3. You can proceed.
Muito obrigada. Bem, uma vez mais, muito obrigada por nos terem aqui. Eu sou Helena Antônio, da Comissão Parlamentar de Angola. Portanto, estou a participar neste encontro com a minha colega Jane Souza, assessora de saúde sexual reprodutiva. Queria agradecer, reiterar os nossos agradecimentos, portanto, ao Fórum Parlamentar da SADC e aqui, portanto, parabenizar uma vez mais o grande trabalho que o projeto de saúde sexual e reprodutiva tem feito, portanto, em Angola e também nos diversos domínios. Eu sou especialista de género para o projeto de cadeia de abastecimento de saúde global da Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, baseada em Angola. Bem, falando um pouco sobre as nossas experiências, portanto, aquilo que tem sido o nosso suporte em termos de parceria com o projeto de saúde sexual e reprodutiva a nível do Parlamento, o projeto de abastecimento de saúde global fornece suporte logístico e também em termos de assistência técnica ao Ministério da Saúde em Angola, incluindo, portanto, construção de capacidade, ou seja, portanto, formação. Nós reconhecemos, portanto, que a nível do fornecimento de serviços e produtos de saúde, as mulheres continuam sendo, portanto, a franja marginalizada, não é verdade, a nível, portanto, do acesso aos serviços de saúde, devido à existência de estereótipos de género, portanto, ou um fator que se verifica, portanto, a nível de quase todos os países da África, e Angola não é uma exceção. É deste ponto de vista que a USAID, então, através do projeto de cadeia de abastecimento de saúde global, a nível daquilo que tem sido o seu suporte ao projeto de saúde reprodutiva no Parlamento, portanto, disponibiliza medicamentos ao Ministério da Saúde de Angola para assegurar que mulheres e, portanto, homens tenham acesso aos serviços de saúde sexual e reprodutiva. Portanto, permitam-me partilhar aqui convosco que, a nível das nossas atividades de supervisão logística em 9 províncias de Angola, não é? A atividade esta realizada no ano passado, foi possível constatar que, portanto, devido ao alto nível de estereótipos de género que ainda se verifica a nível das comunidades locais, nos interiores das províncias em Angola, não é? Portanto, muitas mulheres ainda, portanto, têm dificuldade no acesso dos produtos e serviços de planeamento familiar, e desta maneira não podem, portanto, usufruir completamente dos seus direitos sexuais e reprodutivos, digo, enquanto direitos humanos. E como sabemos, isso tem uma repercussão bastante negativa a nível daquilo que vai ser o processo de empoderamento das meninas, portanto, e mulheres a nível, portanto, da sociedade. Então, é por isso que também o nosso projeto, no âmbito daquilo que tem sido o apoio e suporte, digo, ao projeto de saúde sexual e reprodutiva no Parlamento, não é? Também realiza atividades transversais, não é? Atividades essas que se focam em abordagens de género, fornecendo, portanto, assistência técnica ao Comitê de Gênero do Ministério da Saúde. Portanto, o Comitê de Gênero do Ministério da Saúde é um comitê que existe há 20 anos, não é? Criado graças à advocacia, portanto, do nosso projeto, no âmbito do apoio ao projeto de saúde sexual e reprodutiva, porque nós reconhecemos que, portanto, os serviços da saúde não se podem descurar daquilo que são as questões de género, porque senão estaríamos portanto, a disponibilizar produtos e serviços de saúde sexual e reprodutiva, mas por conta dos estereótipos, as mulheres continuavam a não ter, portanto, acesso a esses serviços, e os resultados de saúde e desenvolvimento humano seriam, portanto, nulos. Então, é desta maneira que nós também fornecemos essa assistência técnica, portanto, juntamente com o Comitê de Gênero do MINSA, uma instituição, portanto, dentro da Direção Nacional de Saúde Pública, já, portanto, oficializada a nível do governo angolano, leva a cabo, então, atividades de sensibilização, capacitação e advocacia, para, então, irmos quebrando os estereótipos de género e assegurarmos que todas as mulheres e homens, em todas as idades, tenham acesso aos serviços de saúde sexual e reprodutiva, HIV, sem qualquer discriminação. E isso é válido em Angola, portanto, aqui, com a ajuda do Parlamento angolano, nós conseguimos que Angola já tem leis disponíveis sobre VIH, direitos sexuais e reprodutivos, gênero, e graças a isso já não se verifica qualquer discriminação de gênero no acesso ao serviço, por exemplo, de planeamento familiar. Portanto, qualquer mulher em todas as idades, qualquer rapariga tem esses serviços. Portanto, o nosso projeto muitas vezes também realiza essas atividades nas escolas com adolescentes, para que estejam bem mais informados. O nosso problema nesse momento é mesmo a nível dos estereótipos culturais locais, portanto, a nível das comunidades, e é isso que nós temos estado a trabalhar juntamente com o Ministério da Ação Social, em coordenação também aqui com o Parlamento, né, o Projeto de Saúde Sexual e Reprodutiva a nível do Parlamento, realizar sensibilização a nível das comunidades. Portanto, nós procuramos envolver sempre, ou seja, colocar lá o setor da saúde como o órgão da linha de frente, não é? Já que saúde reprodutiva pretendemos mesmo melhorar os resultados da saúde e é mais estratégico. Então, desta maneira nós envolvemos, portanto, advogamos para a criação de uma nota técnica, a minha colega já nem um minutinho depois vai partilhar esta questão, que obriga então, portanto, os profissionais de saúde também a realizarem sensibilização a nível das comunidades locais, trabalhando também com os líderes das comunidades, sobados e pessoas mais ligadas às comunidades para a quebra dos estereótipos e que têm dado resultados bastante positivos, que a minha colega Jane rapidamente vai partilhar. Muito obrigada.
Só vou dar um reforço rápido nestes 2 minutos, dizer que também, graças ao o apoio do planeamento do nosso parlamento, que graças a isso também as mulheres, com as nossas visitas ao campo, tivemos ver que muitas mulheres têm dificuldades no planeamento familiar devido a questões de cultura, como é que eu posso dizer? Questões culturais, mas temos trabalhado com isso com a comunidade, mostrando a eles qual é a importância do planeamento familiar, para que os homens não venham a impedir que elas vão aos serviços do planeamento familiar. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences from Angola. I think let's give them a round of applause. It is evident that a lot is happening, and Parliament, through the project, has created avenues for strengthening collaboration among stakeholders in the sector. The cross-cutting nature of the issues we're dealing with, the interconnectedness, stands out from the submission. We appreciate you sharing your experience. We already established in the meeting that we can only learn from each other, and we can strengthen our efforts when we are working in partnership. At this juncture, being generous as I am, I still want to find out if there's anyone with a burning matter before we move to conclude. Yes, Chief.
Thank you very much. Mine really pertains to the engagement of, traditional leaders and to some extent the religious leaders. Yesterday, it was stated that the traditional leaders are very influential. So now I have a question here in terms of engagement with the traditional leaders. To what extent are we involving the traditional leaders? And of course, faith-based organizations when it comes to capacity building. Because you see, when you look at the traditional leaders, even the members of parliament, I think they can concur with me here that without the blessing of the traditional leaders, your chances of winning elections are very slim. So now my question is, what extent in terms of capacity building do we engage these, traditional leaders? Because their influence is immense. That's number one. Now, the second one is, in terms, this one pertains to extractive industry. In terms of, issues of human rights, I just want to find out from my colleagues, particularly researchers, what extent also do they really take this matter in terms of extractive industries? What in other words is, the issue of SRHR, that is extractive industries, what did they actually discover there, if at all the research extends to such sector? What are key issues in extractive industries as far as SRHR is concerned? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. A very pertinent question. And I think part of it will come out from the findings when they are being shared. But I do know that from yesterday's presentations, there were a few countries that highlighted the successes of their collaboration with traditional leaders. One such was Zambia, where they were very elaborate in terms of how they've engaged with traditional leaders. I do know, benefiting from being at regional level, that various countries have actually been working with traditional leaders. Maybe his call is for the sharing of the experience so that they also learn from that experience. We have at regional level been able to have representation of traditional leaders and religious leaders, a very strong voice when we have developed the various model laws, because they were mobilized at national level by the different stakeholders. So that that experience can be shared. Malawi also has a very strong example in terms of traditional leadership role, particularly when we're dealing with issues of ending child marriages. So they are different experiences, and it would be good to share that experience. Your particular question regarding the linkages with extractive industries and SRHR issues, I would propose that we listen to the findings, and then if there is anything that we could add after the presentation, we would do so. Maybe at this point, one of the things that I listened to and didn't quite pick in terms of the linkages from, but I do know that researchers utilized APHRC as a partner, which was providing technical support to the researchers, but even to the members in terms of, first of all, having a resource that could be tapped from at short notice in terms of issues that are emerging within parliaments that require further research and pointed evidence. APHRC has supported the researchers, and it would be good for that to stand out, because it was one particular stakeholder that came in to provide very useful technical support to the process. Then I'm sure that also speaks to our colleagues from data development in terms of part of the stakeholders you need to engage in terms of the interview process. I would want to take the next 2 minutes, and I really mean 2 minutes. If those that have stand out experiences in terms of working with traditional leaders, for the benefit of the question, the question, so that we quickly share that experiences. Who has, within the scope of the project, worked with traditional leaders? Yes, say what?
Thank you. I just possibly want to assist the House by minimizing our assumptions in regards to attitudes and perceptions around traditional leaders. I want to draw our attention to the emerging lived reality that there is a transition that is taking place in terms of traditional leaders. Just last week, I was in a field. I met a traditional leader who is actually a medical doctor, and his level of appreciation of a number of things was quite amazing. We were talking about TB, and his level of appreciation was quite amazing. So I think this is not an isolated case. I want to assume that we do have now young people who are assuming the traditional leadership positions. So all we need to do now is to adjust our attitude and our perceptions so that we can even bring them on board. I do see them having a different attitude and a different way of handling the challenges, even the so-called sensitive issues that we are dealing with. Thank you.
Very important point, challenging assumptions. Ifoma.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think one of the stakeholders from Zambia explained from a community based in terms of how engagement with traditional leaders happened yesterday. But I want to share from a national where I had an opportunity also to be there. I think when you look at, or when you dissect, I think there was an issue of breaking it down. When you break down the relationship with the technical working group, all these isolated stakeholders come on board. In the case of Zambia, especially when we're working on the ESA commitments, you realize that some of these stakeholders like UNESCO, like REPSI, already work with traditional leadership. So that's the plus that came to the project. And when we're dealing at a national level, as has been said, you are looking at how can we have champions. The same way we have champions as members of parliament, we also have champions from the traditional leadership. We also have champions from the religious groupings. It's not like, there's a group that is completely against. There are always different appreciations towards these issues. So in the case of Zambia, the same way we are seated around this table with diverse groupings, we've had opportunities in Zambia where we would sit and a high level traditional, because also traditional leaders are in different ranks. We've had the head, like from their own ranking, who would sit, the paramount chief, who would sit in our meetings and give their opinions. And you'll find that in their chiefdoms, they have well-organized systems to deal with early marriages, to deal with, and their responses and structures are so effective. And for me, I think I benefited from the technical working group because they were able to bring on board and bring parliament together with traditional leaderships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any burning addition? Let me recognize Honorable Kalila, and then I'll give Kevin an opportunity.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I will not dwell so much on what Zambia is doing because it has been ably highlighted. I mean, I'll be done in a minute. It's just advice to all my colleagues from the various parliaments and also the researchers and the civil society organizations. If you look very carefully, most of the barriers, some of the most vehement opponents to SRHR, or the culprits, if I may say, generally are two. One, it's religion. Secondly, it's culture. And the custodians of culture in Africa are our traditional leaders. So if you want to make good progress, you must carry everybody along, including these two, the religious leaders and also the custodians of our culture, who are our traditional leaders. I just wanted to make it very clear to colleagues and so on as they get back, try to engage them. Most countries have institutions which actually the chiefs subscribe to. For example, in Zambia, we have the House of Chiefs. And I'm sure in various countries also they have, either it's a Council of Chiefs or it's a, so you can use that kind of forum to engage them. And quite often when you explain based on evidence, they are quite amenable to buying in. Us as members of parliament, when we were actually issuing out a statement to support our country's commitment to the ESA commitment, we issued a joint statement. Present were some of the traditional leaders and some of the religious leaders. When comprehensive sexuality education was threatened with abolition, some of the most outspoken supporters whom we put in the front were actually the traditional and religious leaders. So that way you will likely make progress. I wanted just to give that advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very vital, Honorable Kalila. You still want to speak, Kevin? You are covered. Yes, I would want to move towards conclusion, but because the sisters want to speak, they shall speak. So the last two speakers will be the two sisters. I start with you, and then you will conclude so that we move to the next. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I didn't see that one of the sisters wants to speak. I think that this point of religious and traditional religious is really important when it comes to implementation of issues of SRHR, SRHR in within the continent. So in our case, the upper house of the parliament, most of the members are principal chiefs. So most of the activities, if not all, when we are conducting the high level meetings, or we are doing the campaigns around SRHR issues, they're always invited. And if you are going to the constituencies, we would find we have them, the principal chiefs, the principal chiefs, we will have the traditional leaders and religious leaders. I remember the campaign that we had with SADC PF as SAF aides, most of the participants there were traditional leaders and religious leaders, because we thought it was a very sensitive issue that needed their input before we can even go to the bigger dialogues with other members of this or other stakeholders in the country.
You have the floor, sister.
Thank you very much. So I was just going to build on what she has said, that for the most part, many of our engagements would include our traditional leaders. I want to cite the example of the marriage bill in Zimbabwe, which progress was told at some point until the chiefs were fully on board, because our traditional leaders are custodians of our culture, and there were some clauses that they really found problematic, and then there was need for engagement. So this initiative and others were instrumental in ensuring that effective engagement. So the bill was tabled in, I think that was 2019, and but it took time until the chiefs were fully on board for it to actually sell through. So I believe that what we probably are missing here, or should reflect further on, are missed opportunities for documentation. Because I think it would be good if we then come up with little case studies to understand how we attained certain results, because we would have this well documented to say there was a glitch here and for what reason, because all the information is there, all the debates are well documented. I think we just need to at some point be able to package that so that our future processes can use this as a reference point.
Thank you very much. In fact, as I alluded to earlier, the experiences from development of SADC PF, SADC model laws has shown the importance of engaging traditional leaders in their diversity. You have the ones that are knowledgeable, educated, but even the ones that we may perceive as not so educated, when you have engaged them, we have seen them contributing significantly to some of the outcomes that we are seeking. The other day, I was listening to one of the prominent journalists. He owns a studio. So he interviewed a Khoisan royalty. And I want to share exactly, I was looking exactly at his post. So he says, I had an interview in the studio. My guest was a Khoisan royalty. When I walked into the studio, I found him dressed in his traditional attire. I had an option to keep my jacket on or dress like him. I opted for the latter. He was so happy and even shedded tears on the program. And he concludes, a tall man does not lose his height by bowing to a short man. There is always a way we can engage with the role players, regardless of their status, while we may catalyze or capitalize on those that have certain capabilities, dual roles. We see it often with the president of the Pan-African Parliament, who is the president of the Chiefs Council in Zimbabwe. Sometimes it's easier to target those because they are readily available. They represent the elite version of the category, but there are many, and in their diversity, we must find a way of engaging them. At this juncture, I think we have done justice to recapping yesterday. It is important that we now proceed to today's business. And on this note, I wish to invite data development to take the floor and guide us as to how we are going to proceed going forward. Thank you very much, and asante sana.
Good morning. How are we feeling today? Please just smile. I want to see your smiles. That's good. We are now moving into the all protocols observed, of course. Good morning. We now want to move on to the last lap of our session. But before we do that, I think we just need a round of applause for ourselves. We did quite a lot yesterday. So it's just to thank ourselves for the hard work. We really appreciated that as development data. Mr. Kurasha, you always make it vice versa, but it's okay. Data development data. So it's development data. We really appreciate. But let's have a round of applause just to appreciate ourselves. Okay. So yesterday, after consolidating the work you shared with our team, we worked overnight. It wasn't easy, but we tried to push so that at least we have the presentation today on the preliminary findings of this ETR process. So just confirm with me, you have received your French version, French. Let me confirm, you have your French version. Good. The Portuguese version? Not yet. Okay, so it's still work in progress. You have the Portuguese? Okay, good.
Just to say we have emailed to the Portuguese speaking, but we're also printing some copies for those who may not have emails, who are not able to access their emails.
Okay, so it's being sorted, please. The English version, of course, translating, you start with the English, then the other two languages. Thank you very much. So what we are going to do, I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Tendai Kurea, who is going to walk us through the presentation. It's a bit long, about 55 slides thereabout. So please, may I request you to pay attention so that at the end of the presentation, you then reflect on the findings. If there are any additions, subtractions, we'll give you that platform to share the feedback after he has presented on the preliminary findings of this end term review. So over to you, Mr. Kurea. The floor is yours now to walk us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I please start by just checking that you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Loud and clear.
Thank you very much. All protocols observed. Once again, to appreciate the privilege that has been given to us to be able to look at your program with the intention of reviewing it and giving our own perception of how this project is being implemented and ideas around what might be working, what might be areas that can be improved upon, and also interacting with the multiplicity of your stakeholders to try and construct this story from an independent point of view. So I would like to, if you will allow me, to take the opportunity to go through the presentation and go through the slides. When I was in school very recently, I was told that we should be able to say a story in 10 slides or less. Today, I beg to differ, but I will move very quickly to make sure that I do not lose the gist of the story, but I am still able to share the main points. Please confirm, Mr. Chibukire, that you can see the screen and that it is now in full screen mode.
Yes, I can confirm. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. And as you can see, this is a review. And when we are doing our reviews at development data, we do not assume that we know about the project. We take a step back and try to see the project from an outsider's point of view, which means some of the things you will hear will sound trivial, but for us, they are not, in the sense that even if they look trivial, someone might have spent a lot of time to put them together the way they appear. So it is a review, and a review means taking stock, looking back. And you will realize that in monitoring and evaluation, it's called monitoring and evaluation because there is a monitoring component which is ongoing and an evaluation part where you stop and you sum up what you have done, and then you decide which way you would like to go next. So it means that we are doing the evaluation part of monitoring and evaluation by taking stock, looking back, looking at the journey, and then thinking about what would be a good way forward. So our presentation is divided into several parts. A background, which most of you probably know better than we do, and then a quick discussion of why we are doing this, what we expect to get out of that, and how we are doing this. A bit of this was already mentioned by my colleague yesterday. Auxilia had a chance to look at the methods that we are using, and so I will not dwell on that. And then some of the limitations and how we have dealt with them. But I would like instead to spend more time on the section on findings, which is further divided into looking at how this project is designed, the theory of change, and then going on to what the deliverables have been, and checking how relevant, effective, efficient they've been, the impact to date, and what sustainability options are there. Then we will give a very quick primer on our conclusions and recommendations. And I would like to say that we have not finished collecting data. And so that last part will probably be strengthened or at least adapted to improve any new materials that we get after this meeting. So, by way of background, this is an SRHR HIV and AIDS governance project, which is a collaborative effort of SADC PF and 10 affiliated parliaments. I want to pause there and say that it is underlining SRHR, and we will talk about what we mean by those areas that have been included, HIV and AIDS, but also governance. So it is a governance project by and large, but governance of these three key issues, and that it is a partnership of SADC, PF, and its affiliated parliaments. And so it means it has a regional perspective with the bulk of the work being done at country level. I think it is important to realize this because it makes the case for doing things, some of the things at the regional level, but wishing that they would actually take root at the national level. And when you're assessing sustainability, impact, and so forth, we want to go to the national level, to the constituents level even, to check if that is indeed what is happening. This is funded by CEDA, and it builds on the first phase, which was implemented between 2014 and 2018, also funded by CEDA. But also maybe before 2014, we didn't go beyond 2014 going backwards, but just to mention that this period, 2014 to 2018, did shape a lot of what then happened in this project. And it's aligned to SADC's vision and SDGs. So it means it has a shared vision of what SADC as a whole and our global partners are aiming to achieve. So the purpose of the review is to assess the achievements of the project, to inform current and future actions. So we would like to check if we achieved the outcomes that we set out to pursue. We want to look at the impact on parliamentary delivery. And this is really important because this is a regional project that has clear actions targeting members of parliaments and the institution of parliament at country level and the constituents that they represent. We want to see the impact on the key issues of importance, and we would like to check if there are any challenges and bottlenecks to implementation. The project's fund utilization, monitoring and evaluation system, audit function, and so forth, things that have been put in place to make sure that the project can be delivered in a way that can be verified as fair and accurate. And also, we want to check how it links and aligns with the different partners and players, including other initiatives, other stakeholders, And finally, we want to be able to draw conclusions and recommendations for a possible next phase, whether that's funded by SIDA or by others, or SIDA and others. Certainly the lessons should be applicable. So in layman's terms, what we are doing is we are asking ourselves, and I would like to extend this question to all of us so that we can ask our subjects, are we doing that in the law? With the same kind of resources, would we still do things the way we are doing, or would do them differently to achieve the same kind of results? Did the project deliver on the planned actions? Did the actions produce the desired changes? Will our achievements last? What gaps exist? What lessons have we achieved? I mean, have we seen? How can we take these lessons forward? So basically, these are the questions we are asking ourselves, and we are saying, let's look at what we have done. I don't want to spend much time on this slide because it was presented yesterday, but we have an evaluation criteria, the DAC criteria that we are using. We have systematically developed questions that we have sent to some of you to complete, and we've interviewed along the same lines. And we would have now started, and I think we are past midway, analyzing some of these results and putting together a report. My presentation is 52 pages. Our report, we are in the process of trying to reduce it from 100 and something pages to be something that's palatable, so in the 34th page range. So this slide just basically shows the range of stakeholders we are consulting, the implementers at the regional level, at country level, the researchers at the core of work at country level, line ministries, and so forth, civil society partners and funding partners, and certainly everyone who's participated in the meeting produced and provided valuable insights into what we are putting. If we had presented yesterday, we would have really preempted a lot of the discussion that then ensued. So it was really good that we were able to start by reflecting and then consolidating. So the evaluation criteria, again, presented yesterday, I won't dwell on this, but certainly in unpacking those questions that I gave you earlier on, is the intervention doing the right things? Are we achieving what we set out to do, and so forth? So relevance, effectiveness, coherence, efficiency, sustainability, and impact. Before I start presenting the results, we appreciate that this is an activity that relies on logistics, and it relies in collecting data, and it also seeks to address language and any other data issues. As a methodology, like any other fairly scientific methods, what we put in should dictate what we get out. So if we put garbage in, we are likely to also get garbage out. But we have put in place measures to try and make sure that our assessment is as accurate as possible. So I will now go into the findings, which I believe is what we have really been waiting for. And I will discuss these and a lot of them should really resonate with our discussions from yesterday. And I'm hopeful that there will still be some things that were not discussed to date, but that I would like to bring to your attention so that you have an opportunity to feedback and agree with us or disagree with us, but certainly that when we do put them in the report, they are from an informed point of view. The first thing that we did was to take some time to try and think about the way this project was designed, how it was conceived from a theoretic point of view. And when we put these pieces in place, it makes it easier for us to then understand what was happening and why it was happening the way it was happening. So from a theoretic framework point of view, and in lay terms, we think about our environment, which is our context. We think about the intervention that we are going to take, then how we are going to implement the desired outcomes. And in terms of context, we are thinking about the natural environment, socio-cultural environment, social, human, and the opportunity itself, and opportunities that exist around how organizations are structured, how technology and globalization is unfolding, what opportunities are there for funding, and so forth. But the intervention itself will almost always have these components: who, what exactly is going to happen, why it is happening, how it is going to happen, and when it is going to happen. So, for example, all the things we did between 2019 and 2023 were going to be more difficult to implement before 2019 and 2023. So the opportunity was now there for us to implement what we did do. Otherwise, before that, or even 10 years before that, some of the things that you are saying were now possible, might not have been. So it's good to think about this project in that sense, because then we also have an opportunity to rethink what now should we be doing? Should we be going back to do the same things as if this was 2018, 2019, or should we now be changing some of these things when we look forward? So in short, we certainly looked at the context and we saw that it was ripe for us to address the poor legal and policy framework. And the designers saw that parliamentarians and the Institute of Parliament was really pivotal in addressing these very specific issues at that particular time. And so the opportunity was ripe, it was ethical to do so, and parliamentarians had the mandate to actually do it. So all the ingredients were there at the same time, which made it possible to then intervene. And once we do this type of analysis, almost always our results will be good, because then we are using all the ingredients and we are making a very good recipe in that sense. So it means then we expect a better legal and policy framework. We expect a better response framework. And in the longer future, we are on our way to better SRHR, HIV and AIDS indicators. We are on our way towards gender and other equality measures that we yearn for. So why is it that it was important that SADC PF and working with the partnership of the Institution of Parliament and MPs was happening at this stage? First of all, the mandate SADC PF is already recognized by SADC Summit of Heads of State and Government, is recognized institution of SADC, independent with separate legal mandate, has financial and operations independence, and response to needs expressed by parliaments and parliamentarians. So this is pivotal. Try to do this with another organization and you will see that the results may not be as likely. But coming with this is that with this independence of the institution of parliament and parliamentarians means that there is a need to raise adequate resources to complement funding from member states. So this is where SIDA came in, and this is where it all became a very good mix, and the project was possible and conceived as it was. Now, as far as design is concerned, our analysis shows that this is a project that is really designed to strengthen the role that parliamentarians play, and as it is applied to SR, HR, HIV, and AIDS, and hence the title of the project as well. But what are these roles? And it means we want to check how parliamentarians' roles around representation are amplifying community level voices, how their roles around budgeting are, whether indeed there is evidence of voting for equitable budgets and based on evidence, legislative aspects, development and passing of enabling legislation, and oversight and accountability roles, which is to do with tracking progress and delivery of services. The picture that I show here is actually borrowed from the project report itself and is trying to even identify further these roles as they relate to SR and HR. So this is really the design of the project. This is what we set out to do. And of course, there's a multiplicity of activities that happened, but from our point of view, at the core was strengthening the parliamentarian so that they can actually do the 4 functions that within their mandate. Why was it necessary to do this? Because the context in 2019 was ready to was now ripe for addressing some of these issues, limited enactment of progressive laws around SR, HR, few countries ranking highly on democracy and governance, as evidenced by indicators that that are usually used, including things like the Mo Ibrahim Index and so forth. And at that point, a model law one model law had already been done, and it was now possible to use the established organ responsible for domestication to even use this institution, this committee, to pass even additional modern laws so that progressive laws can be adopted for use by member states. And at that stage, SR-HR issues had already been discussed in various standing committees of SADC PF. So it means we were not introducing a completely new subject. Framework for partnership had been in place and had already involving most of the critical stakeholders, starting with the MPs, their institution, line ministries, CSOs, and other actors. So the model law on child marriage had already shown what was possible, and we could extend to other areas. And the project was designed, but then COVID-19 happened. So in the design, it meant that adaptations were important to deal with this issue. What were the issues that the project were addressing? When we look at all the engagements that were happening at constituents level, at national levels, through the working groups, it is clear that this was really reporting to the 6 key intervention areas outlined in the project document as well. So gender equality and elimination of SGBV, elimination of early and unintended pregnancies, and promotion of safe abortion, universal commodity access to SRHR services, comprehensive sexuality education, protection of key populations, and the promotion of human rights whilst building the democratic drive. So these 6 are really the areas that were being addressed when we unpack SRHR and HIV and AIDS governance. This is the theory of change that appears in the project document. It has 9 output areas feeding into 9 outcomes and 3 impact objectives feeding to a shared vision. If you analyze this a bit further, you realize that it can actually be grouped into 4 sub-areas. Actions that are put to support project delivery. In other words, actions that SADC, PF, and countries were going to do to make sure that the project aimed at support outcomes 2 to 5, for example, are really all focusing on the parliamentarian and his or her role and how to strengthen that. Then outcomes 6 and 7 actually do support the first 4 I've mentioned, outcome 2 to 5, by strengthening. Hello?
Tendai, maybe
Hello?
you might wish to consider taking off your video. There are moments when we're losing you on the basis of the strength of your connectivity. Let's see if that will help.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm not sure how much you might have missed, but can I continue from where I am?
Yes, you should be able to continue from where you are. We just want to minimize.
Okay, so I hope it's better, but outcomes 6 and 7 are on networking to strengthen the 4 key functions. And although added much later in the programs, outcomes 8 and 9 extend to addressing emerging issues around the importance of including democracy, human rights, and governance in ensuring that then these other outcomes are actually bearing fruit. So if we summarize that, you will see that then the impact goal is enhanced role of parliamentarians, which really shows off by improved capacity to deliver in their 4 core areas, visibility and presence at communities, and advancing democratic accountability and promoting human rights. So when we talk about the specific activities that we have encountered or we have done and what they are showing, you will see that they will fit in some of these matrix, in this particular matrix, and it shows that this particular project was designed well, and that because of this design, it's supposed to bear the fruits that are needed. The project centered on strengthening the main functions of Parliament, as I've said. So we're summing this up, and that the context was carefully analyzed to identify actions that would result or that had the greatest chance of success. So this is a plus. There is clarity of project justification. There is clarity of articulated roles for key players, including parliamentarians themselves, parliament staff, researchers, line ministries, and CSOs. There is flexible design, which was able to adapt during COVID-19, and context parameters were addressed. However, these can be strengthened. For example, the linkage with environmental issues such as climate change, political issues such as political governance, polarization in the countries, and so forth. Social, especially culture and religion, where champions needed, otherwise they remain as gatekeepers, and then it will then appear as if it's a project that's aiming to address those as recipients. So bringing them on board is something that can be strengthened. I'm not saying these functions were not there. I'm just saying that it is possible to design a future program where these ones are more prominent. Intervention levels defined. So there's local, national, regional, and to some extent global through the cross networkings that can be observed. Categorization of needs will actually reveal that some of the players or recipients can be given more voice, boys, parents, community gatekeepers, especially around religion and culture, as I've mentioned. But the conclusion is that the theory of change is fit for purpose, can be updated should a new phase be designed, and the groupings around the outcome objectives can actually be streamlined further so that you have fewer of those, but not necessarily losing the range of activities. It is therefore to integrated SRHR services and rights for all is shared by many, and certainly CEDA funding this program is contributing towards that. It certainly means that the environment of enhanced participatory democratic accountability is required. So objectives 8 and 9 are prominent. They need to be included in a future program, apart from the ones that were already there. But it's important to realize. Can I continue?
Yes.
Okay, it's important to realize that we are still only beginning. The indicators remain unacceptably high, SRHR indicators, and that we continue to have some of the worst SRHR indicators globally. So we need to always think that, know that even if we have good results from the current project, we are only starting, the journey is young. So we only need to actually improve and do our things better. Otherwise, we can pat our backs because we have won the battle, but we have not won the, we're actually still beginning. Why do I say this? If you look at the longer term vision, which is where we really want to be going, maternal mortality rates are substantially higher than expected. And really only 2 countries, Mauritius and Seychelles, have less than 70 deaths per 100,000 live births. Maternal mortality rates in countries such as Eswatini, Zimbabwe, DRC, and so forth remain unacceptably very high. In fact, if you put a map of the world by the country, most of our countries remain at the tail end of undesirably, unacceptably high indicators. There are improvements in service provision, but this is not yet showing in the vision that we are sharing with everyone who is doing development. And certainly there are still stakeholders on the project, as CSOs and so forth. We can do more advocacy. For example, very high percentage of women having at least one ANC, but very low levels of women with at least one postnatal visit. So even within service delivery, there are things that we are doing well and things that we are not doing so well, targeting the very same person. Now, if we look at progress towards the shared vision, the project managed to enhance the role of parliamentarians. It's very clear. There is progress towards the shared vision, albeit slow. Project consciously planned to address the linkages between poor universal health indicators and poor governance. So outcomes 8 and 9 on governance will amplify issues of human rights, participatory democracy, and constitutionalism, and should actually going forward be more prominent. Domestication of model laws is ongoing and will consolidate participatory, this participatory democracy. And the multi-stakeholder approach will and should continue to be built to increase sustainability. So much for the overall picture. Now going into the smaller picture, the specifics, so to speak. If we look at relevance, we're looking at relevance of each of these outcome objectives, and also whether they speak to building and contributing to the big picture. We realize from the big picture, as I've mentioned, that we did well in terms of identifying what to do, how to do it, and so we are on our journey towards the desired vision. But what does the small picture say? All 9 outcomes areas are highly relevant. They're doing the right things, all linked and contributing towards the desired impact and vision. And development of model laws at regional level is aiding national level efforts to domesticate this. All stakeholder groups are on board and they see value of the project. Project outcomes 8 and 9, addressing key governance issues, should certainly be included as they impact on outcomes in the other areas of this project and elsewhere. In terms of relevance, the project designed to build the capacity of MPs, it did that. It strengthened the ability to perform in all 4 key areas. It helped support MPs to champion SRHR issues, and the opportunity that was identified was clearly exploited. So governance policy legislation addressed by parliamentarians and stakeholders, and certainly their roles strengthened. And looking back, we will say we probably made the right step, and looking forward, we certainly can pick the gains and re-strategize. The project built on existing actions. All thematic areas were relevant. The big picture of a regional project that is country focused are very clear. Overall relevance is measured as a sum of its parts So if you look at all the 9 objectives, you will see how they're contributing to the big picture. There's none that you will say is not valid, but it's important to adapt and include specific governance outcomes to address issues around elections, migration, SRH issues of migrant labor, very relevant to current settings, and certainly explore the linkages or further explore the linkages with key issues around climate change, drug abuse, global wealth distribution, and so forth. Did what we do result in the required changes? Was it effective? From yesterday and from also even this today, there were very clear examples of how this project was effective. And it's effective in part because at country level, the clerk of parliament is the custodian of the project. So it means ownership is there at country level, and time can thus allocated to project activities and the empowerment of the MPs so that they can do the different functions as we expected. And it's effective because researchers were a pivotal resource. They provided the much needed evidence to MPs. They brought together different stakeholders, sources of knowledge, sources of evidence, and so forth. And certainly were a very important resource. I don't think we would be talking about the same level of result if the researchers were not on board and performing the functions. And it's effective because adoption of laws was pivotal to address knowledge and policy gaps. So there was a starting point and certainly an entry point to discussing issues such as decriminalization of HIV, access to contraceptives, and so forth. But some sensitive issues remain less attractive and therefore have less traction. Think about how to keep these visible and how to make sure that they are addressed. The region, countries of the region are at different levels of adapting the models, and additional support is required. It means that we may have a regional picture of moving towards the desired changes, but we are not necessarily all moving at the same pace. And it means it's important to address some of the factors such as political dynamics, which may in some cases, in fact, there were evidence from the data that we collected that sometimes that could override meaningful debate. If, for example, the skew of the debate then moves away from the important topic under discussion and become conducted along, say, political lines. It means that the issue of gatekeepers, which I will not belabor, needs to be addressed. Are we bringing all the champions on board? Can we identify what has happened in other countries and share this, the Honorable MP from Zambia, how it's important to bring all stakeholders, not as gatekeepers, but as champions as well. Very specific examples, which I will not belabor because we discussed them yesterday. So the role played by parliamentarians was a process of personal conversion before championing, dealing with own personal dilemmas of being a parent, sometimes even a religious leader, but also still needing to champion comprehensive sexuality education and safe abortion. as MP. So very interesting processes that happened at individual levels before then members would feel empowered to speak adequately about issues that they would have probably thought 10 years ago as taboo. And certainly some MPs coming to the limelight and taking very specific small pieces and championing them and making sure that these have been taken on board. The example of the MP from Zimbabwe who is now called the birth certificate MP and so forth. Project involved men as well as women and youth, and the case studies of youths being able to interact with members of parliament and even being able to address parliament, very good lessons that show that yes, what we planned to do works. I will not go into detail with this one, but it shows again how these different things were working, why it was effective. It's because we built capacity and then we provided platforms for interaction, brought in resources from partners, including in line ministries, in civil society organizations, and mobilized around important areas and established coalitions around SRHR and synergies, which was important because then the platforms were non-threatening. So it demystified perceptions around the roles for MPs and made it possible to actually follow an agreed agenda. It doesn't mean that within that there weren't disagreements. It just means that there were platforms to address those disagreements. These benefits can be realized quickly. There's an example from Madagascar who joined fairly recently, but are already working to address key legislations. So this shows that the model that has been adopted is replicable and can be used in countries, member states that have not necessarily yet joined. But we have to be cautious because MPs themselves will not stay as MPs all the time. A significant number can be lost after elections. Was the project efficient? The key messages are that the project was designed such that most work is implemented at country level using a lean staffing component. Project benefits from country level hosting and ownership agreements with parliament meant that we didn't have to start from scratch and create independent secretariats at that level. Planning events done in advance, which means it's possible for MPs and other stakeholders to plan on which events they can attend and how to make their inputs. And once again, outline that the roles played by staff in parliaments, including and especially the researchers, made sure that the MPs were given a resource to support their participation. All the stakeholders mentioned that their terms of reference were clear, including even the civil society organizations. They were able to sign on their terms of reference. Researchers were able to sign on. They were very clear about what was expected of them. And the stakeholders, especially researchers and implementers at country level, mentioned that feedback is always constructive. Support by advisors is provided in proportional to identified needs. So there are some who will receive more support because they need it, and others who will probably be able to do things on their own and therefore are able to move forward. I will not talk about outcomes 8 and 9 again, but just to highlight that important, because it will improve efficiency if we do put that, because it sort of addresses some of the potential barriers before they happen. Use of virtual meetings was deemed useful, and it was important for getting the required capacity to implement the model laws at country level. And before I leave this slide, some countries, there are some areas of improvement. For example, the quality of the researcher, although they all sign contracts with clear terms of reference, the recruitment process is not uniform, which means that also the quality of the researcher varies from country to country. It is important to put some more thought into how to bring the capacity of the researcher at country level to be able to deliver at the same level. So as a result, some countries would delay in submitting progress reports, and most of these reasons were at country level, but follow-up would be done, especially through the office of the M&E consultant. I'll show you a graphic just later that demonstrates this point a bit more. But before I do, efficiency was increased by linking with CSOs. So this relationship was mutually beneficial. This natural alliance is there because MPs and CSOs advocate for action at community level. So they are advocating for the same community. So it was an alliance that was natural. And CSOs as boundary partners were able to maintain their independence, but also able to influence the program. So it means that they would be able to provide necessary support, sometimes by providing even logistical support for MPs to conduct their oversight functions and other functions. Partnership between MPs and CSOs, as I've said, is mutually beneficial. And the workings from what we have gathered as through the formal channels such as working groups, but also informally through conversations that are not necessarily shared through the formal media, which really is how advocacy is conducted anyway. And this has demystified the institution of parliament and helped to strengthen it. And it has also been important for CSOs themselves because now they are able to identify the champions and influence them and point them to good practices or even bad ones where action would also be required. Partnerships, including with CSOs, as I've mentioned, but with line ministries, with victims, with during constituency visits resulted in more efficient resource allocations. We can see, for example, facilitation of interaction with victims, which has helped to change positions that were previously held by the MPs themselves. Discussions with survivors echo these sensitive issues were very important for domestication of the laws, and the many examples that have been cited. But it means that during this period, some of the hard ground around sensitive issues has been broken, and conversations happening behind the scenes are saying that even the other more difficult issues can and will be addressed. And there are examples where this has led to increased allocation of resources for examples in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, where commodities for SRHR have been increased. Efficiency also touches on the way resources are managed by the project. So output one, so we have noticed that audits are required annually, and I would like to follow up because I did not see 4 audit reports, or at least 3 audit reports, but they are required annually. And the last audit report shows improvements in addressing management issues that had also been raised before. So it means even at that level, there are deliberate actions to become more accountable following issues that had been raised in audit reports. There is, unfortunately, some areas that would still need to be looked at. There's no adequate tracking of staff inputs, staff time inputs. So it might be something that the audits have raised, but it's something that will also show more accountability. And when you look at M&E, reports are required quarterly, but on the basis of all the ones that we have reviewed so far, it appears, and also with discussions with researchers, some have actually openly mentioned feeling overwhelmed, especially where they serve as in other roles of parliament. One was saying to me, for example, that if I am already working for the portfolio on health, it's easy because then I know that requirements on this project are aligned to what is expected of me. But I have to jump out sometimes, leave that portfolio of health and go to economics, to budgets or to a different portfolio. And so it sometimes then means I will be pushing paper because I do not have adequate time to concentrate on one particular subcommittee. M&E reports have thus been submitted on time for most countries, but some ongoing concerns on timeliness and quality for others. So there is room to improve how the M&E reports are done, how they can be shared with the region through the M&E advisor, and how to make sure that all countries report on time at the same level of quality. So here is an example I'm picking, just to highlight in this particular case that the M&E reports are fed by what has happened on the ground. In this particular case in Lesotho, this was a time where there were elections, so the MPs were engaged elsewhere. So you can see also the level of reporting then that the SRHR reporter is left with, compared to, for example, in Eswatini, where there were no elections and activities were happening. So it just highlights how the project has to take into account those differences in terms of availability of MPs and grid reporting, which should be uniform across all countries. This slide talks about financial matters, and the total budget for this year, for the past 4 years, and regional activities, each country got the same amount, and also number of participants, days, and costs for all activities already set. This for us is something that needs to be looked at, because the assumption is that of equality, which is not necessarily equity. So a budget that is based on equity, where there's greatest need, there are more resources and so forth, will and we should surely bring those countries that are lagging behind to catch up with the rest of the region. And the budgets had ceilings for activities, so disbursements from the donor was in line with contractual agreements and against audited annual statements and revised annual work plans for the year. Disbursement to countries was on a regular basis, and as and when the need arose, and turnaround time on internal approval processes on average took 10 days, and disbursement to countries 7 days. So the issues with this are to do with budget rigidity. We have to stick with what is in the budget. It is not based on equity principles, but more on equality, and the inflexibility or limited flexibility in sub-budget lines mean that we have to do the same things in all the countries. And difference in cost of holding activities across countries is not considered. But we know that costs vary from country to country for exactly the same activity. Budget should consider country specifications, in this case, costing differences, and explore the possibility of automation of the system so that request disbursements can actually be automated, be reduced from the 17 days to maybe even a day or two if this was truly being done electronically. Impact. We are almost there, please bear with me, but we're getting there. The major achievements are clearly standing out. Results were achieved both at regional and national level. Multiple legislations adopted at national level. There are examples there. SRHR interrogated through more than 100 oversight questions across national parliaments, and 2 additional model laws were developed on gender-based violence and on public financial management. So in terms of impact, these are standing out, and the project has raised the profile and capacity of MPs. This is not easy to see, but you can see by the amount of conversations that are now happening and the increased budgets in universal health coverage, examples from Zimbabwe, Malawi, public hearings with general public and through outreach programs, which has led to passing of key legislations at country level that I've mentioned, establishment of drop-in centers and clinics for key populations, and removal of duty on SRHR materials in Zambia, in Lesotho, and community engagement on SRHR. The use of researchers has built capacity of parliamentarians and vice versa, because the researchers themselves have also learned by interacting with parliamentarians, and has led to increased allocations, budgetary, bills being passed, and it has also enabled MPs to be able to speak confidently on SRHR, HIV and AIDS issues. Sorry, this one is a repetition. I will address that. So if you look at the number of SADC countries, now just giving the picture as far as laws are concerned, homosexuality decriminalized in 8 countries. We still have challenges in sex work, discriminalization, in unrestricted abortion, but certainly you can see some work around revising sexual harassment and sexual offenses legislations. In SADC countries, explicit sexual and reproductive health laws and policies, human trafficking in all countries addressed, HIV and AIDS policies in all countries, but marriage over 18 for girls and boys without exception. You can see that this is an area where continued support is required, and protecting girls' pregnancy and protecting pregnant girls' right to stay in school as well. Areas where additional support is required. And this graphic is borrowed from the Citizen and Gender Links, which just shows how the impact on homosexuality legislation looks at the moment in countries such as Eswatini, Namibia, Madagascar, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, and so forth. Imprisonment for up to 14 years, up to 30 years in countries like Tanzania and Zambia. Access to contraceptives, the ages by country presented here. And so this is really just to put a picture of how this is evolving in the region. Sustainability is the last discussion point in terms of the DAC criteria. And long-term sustainability will hinge on integration of HIV and AIDS intervention by ensuring that the policies, including on comprehensive sexuality education, exist and incorporated, enabling environment for the provision of these services, and supporting national technical working groups to continue to do their work. So providing funding for this should, in the long term, really come from the national budget and involve a multi-sectoral approach. So existence of the model law in the countries where they have been adopted, it spurs action at country level, and this is sustainable and important for if these laws are provided with tools such as guidelines, scorecards, and so forth to track progress. We've mentioned the gatekeepers that can be included for sustainability as well. And some of the areas where additional work is required around reporting. So this is the end as far as the DAC criteria is concerned. The next slide just outlines some of the challenges that the project met. COVID-19, the differences in implementation at country level, financial gaps for implementing the past legislations, donor dependence, starting with the project itself, going on in SADC PF, and going to even activities happening at national level, including national health budgets that are substantially funded from external sources, and a number of countries not meeting their Abuja declaration targets. Then there were specific groups that were mentioned as missing from those that are targeted, disabilities, people with disabilities and boy children. And if I should sum up, and I would like to really make a disclaimer that as far as our recommendations are concerned, these are preliminary. We will have an opportunity to really look at all this material again and strengthen them. But some of these are really clear. It's important to include strategies for MPs to implement SRA-HR projects at constituency level by looking at what partnerships are possible, how to access resources at this level, and continue to build the capacity, their capacity to implement the activities, advocating for funding from the national budget, and strengthening the multi-sectoral approach that was strengthened during the implementation of this project. So increase private sector participation, especially in commodities, increase participation of gatekeeper champions from culture, religion, adolescent opinion leaders. If you look at how Twitter, for example, and Facebook is evolving, many opinion leaders there that are speaking to young people, even beyond parents and cultural gatekeepers that we're talking about. Extend governance outcomes to equip MPs to address even other areas such as corruption. Document models for empowering MPs as adopted by countries on the program, including how key stakeholders were won over. So some of these things can be repackaged with a specific interest to for use in countries that are probably still starting or at a different stage that others have passed through, so they can learn from these lessons. And certainly increase participation of other actors, including universities and other institutions, to increase linkages for MPs to accessing credible and latest research. In conclusion, and again, I will take a disclaimer that we will have an opportunity to strengthen this, but it is our view that this is a good program with very important results. The theory of change can be adapted and updated to take stock of progress and the evolution in outcomes. Improvements in budget management and M&E at country and regional level should result in a smoother program that will easily be expandable. And lastly, we have a homework as consultants to conduct outstanding interviews, transcribing the validation meeting and making sure that we capture everything that came out of this meeting, crystallizing our conclusions and recommendations, and then updating our draft report and follow some feedback with key informants, especially on finances, monitoring and evaluation, and then be able to submit an updated an updated draft report. But this is where we are, and these are the things that are coming from this review. Please bear with us. This was a rather long presentation, but we thought we should speak to everything that we've put in the report or we plan to put in report, so that you have an opportunity to react to this before we finalize. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Correa. Yes, it was a long presentation, but delegates are really paying attention to see. So we have spoken. I'm now opening for comments, feedback, suggestions, additions, subtractions. Okay, so let's start this row. Okay, we have two. This row we have comment. Lift up, yeah. Up, 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 up. Yes, right. This row, that row. Okay, let's start here, going down.
All right, thank you very much. This for the presentation, very well articulated and issues very well tabulated. I just wanted to just make an addition. I think for Zambia, in terms of the effectiveness, I think it would be good to include how the formalized multi-sectoral response was coordinated so as to leverage on both capacities and resources, given that not all, we can't have enough of resources, but we have worked very well in terms of where there's been limitations of resources. I'll give an example. After the signing off of the ESA commitments, we had the joint development of the action plan, where traditional leaders were present, members of parliament, youth organizations. And then from there, once the implementation plan, national implementation plan on the ESA commitments were done, we've gone as as partners to develop, to support traditional leaders to develop chiefdom development plans, which have taken into consideration the planned activities within the ESA commitments. And this is how we are cascading the activities from national level right up at the community level. And the office of the member of parliament is part of the chiefdom development plan implementation. And then in terms of the impact, I know that in Zambia, again, with the support of civil society organization, members of parliament have constituted a caucus on SRHR and an advocacy strategy was developed, which will soon be launched. So that, I think, is also an impact that could be good to include in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have noted those two issues on the under effectiveness and impact, the formalized multi-sectorial approach, and also the support, the advocacy strategy under impact. Thank you. Next.
Thank you so much. And I would like to congratulate Development Data for putting together and managing to sort of consolidate all the input and also presenting a very clear report. I'm mainly interested in the impact, particularly I think it was captured well. I'm just wondering if we are able to also include some of the minor milestones. So for example, if there was a change of attitude, if there were maybe even, commitment statements from ministers, from MPs, I think this would be critical, especially if a second cycle comes up, because some of the things, for example, in Zimbabwe in December, we had the Minister of Health committing in Parliament to bring a law that addresses teenage pregnancies. So imagine if that law comes and is passed in the next few years, it will still be a win for the SADC project. Unfortunately, things like advocacy, they don't sometimes take place in the period that we want to, but they do sometimes then translate later on. So maybe if there's a way to strengthen that side of impact. And secondly, on impact, I'm just wondering, slide 44 to 47, the slides were basically outlining I think there was a slide outlining the number of laws within the SADC region, for example, which countries, number of countries that have decriminalized LGBTI. The next slides, we're also focusing on, let's say, countries with very explicit SRHR policies. I'm wondering if these slides are reflective of the impact. So for example, if we're saying that there are 8 countries with unrestricted, it's an example. I know that's not what the slide said. So if we are saying that there are 8 countries that have unrestricted abortion laws, that statement alone, for me, does not reflect the impact. What would reflect the impact is maybe a picture of when the project started, maybe there were 4 countries, but now there are 8. So I'm wondering if those slides are reflective of the impact. If they are just, you know, maybe an FYI kind of information, then maybe they are more placed in the background than on the impact. It would be interesting to see how many countries, you know, what was the increase in countries or the decrease in countries that passed a certain law in SRHR. And then lastly, on sustainability, I don't know, maybe it could have been an attempt from the researchers or from the report writers to summarize for the slides, but I felt that it wasn't strong enough in terms of reflecting how you know, the project or how we can sustain the gains from the project. So I'm also wondering if maybe in the next part of recommendations, we can sort of draw out the sustainability mechanisms for the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next, yes.
Yes, good afternoon, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. May I thank development data for this sterling work and for their efforts, commendable efforts in ensuring that the successes of the project are adequately captured and reported. I have 2 issues, I think, which came out yesterday, and they pertained to the sustainability of the project. One of the issue was the needs of utilizing and strengthening the relationship between the project and the national working groups. Because I think the national working groups are very important when it comes to mobilizing resources, especially considering that probably looking at our case in Zimbabwe, the national working groups is composed of UN agencies, CSOs, representative from national governments. I think there are avenues that we can utilize in mobilizing resources, and I think it was not adequately captured in the report. Then another thing is on project feasibility, and I think what is I think there's an old age adage which says until the lion learns to ride, the story will always glorify the hunter. We should be able to speak or to document our successes, even the minor successes. We should be able to document them. So we tell our stories. We motivate people even to come and join or to partner with us in implementing such activities. I think it would also go a long way in enhancing the sustainability of the project and mobilizing resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a contribution on the challenges and perhaps recommendations. Which challenges were we were able to overcome in a way. So meaning it's a success to the project. And I think maybe as researchers, we didn't highlight it very clearly in our deliberations. But the other challenge we experienced, which I think should be captured in the report, I saw COVID disruption, but we also had some disruptions because of elections taking place in some of our jurisdictions. I think there were about 3 during the course of the project implementation. Zambia, Lesotho, I think, and Angola must have had elections, and the disruption of extended periods of 3 to 5 months created a very big challenge because, as you know, the MPs were not available being the key implementers of the project. But what helped in all these situations is the amount of capacity building which had been invested in the researchers and the staff were then able to bridge that gap. And they were basically holding the institutional memory such that when the new MPs came back, these researchers and staff of parliament were then able to pass on the baton to the MPs to pick it up from where the previous group left off. And I think I can attest in the case of Zambia that it worked very well. We were amazed at the pace at which the new members of parliament then picked it up and immediately were even running ahead of us. So I think that this is something that needs to be applauded and highlighted. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that contribution. We have noted that. Oh, okay, Honorable.
Yeah, so thank you very much for this opportunity to give feedback or to make comments on this report, which has just been presented. I must begin, like my colleague from Zimbabwe has said, just to congratulate Development Data for having put together this presentation that speaks to the work that a lot of us parliamentarians, together with my colleagues across the 14 member states, have been involved in the last 4 years, some of us beyond even that. And I must say from the beginning that this has been a very important meeting for me, and I'm sure my colleagues, the members of parliament. Why do I say that? All of you are gathered here have been involved in one way or another, but your primary task has been to build the capacity of us, members of parliament. So all of you have just been involved in one way or another, just to ensure that the 8 of my colleagues who are here and others who are not here were able to catch the fever of SRHR, were able to advocate, spread it within our 4 core mandates of legislation, representation, budget, and also oversight. So important to me that even if I was asked to come here by road, I would have come. Or better or worse still, even if I was asked to walk, I would have walked here. Why do I say that? Because I've been eager over the years to try and understand, one, whether this project has been worth it or not. And the answer is yes, from what I can gather here. Whether this project was relevant or not, and the answer is it was relevant. In other words, yes, it was relevant. Has this project been impactful from your presentation and the methodology used, which is not for us? I must mention, by the way, that as members of parliament, we are politicians at the same time. So we are not principally concerned with all these technical things that you've been presenting here. Us, what we want to hear is, was this project worth it? Was it working? Should it continue or not? And those are the things that we have been eagerly waiting for. And from what you have presented, which I agree with, because you've been able to show clearly the methodology that you used, how you collected your data, how you put everything together. And I can say, and probably with my colleagues, that I agree entirely with the conclusions that have been made. However, my contributions are that as we have drawn our recommendations, I noted from your presentation 1 or 2 areas which were a little bit gray. First, there was a statement observed to the effect that there was limited enactment of legislation in various parliaments. In other words, we didn't do as much as we should have done in passing as many laws as possible to improve the environment for SRHR. I also noticed that we have not done as much as we should have done in domesticating most of the model laws, which SADC Parliamentary Forum has rolled out. We have not done as much in terms of meeting the famous Abuja declaration of 15% budget. Of course, we are beginning now, some of us, to rethink this 15%, which was decided many years ago, whether it is worth to continue talking about this, because after all, nobody's, maybe only 2 countries, as far as I remember, who are meeting this. So maybe it is important to look at another parameter. You know, I think the African Union has several which they have championed, such as the spending per capita, the Africa scorecard on how countries are spending money rather than the 15%. So, but that's not important. What is important, what I'm driving at, is the fact that, of course, you have highlighted that we have not done as much as we should have done. The other aspect is on the time frame. I personally believe that with the very high and undesirable indicators in SRHR, I think that you cannot achieve 100% objective in 4 years. Okay, so it's a good start, but certainly the time frame is not enough for us to begin to see a radical shift in the indicators. In terms of sustainability, I think that there are 2 issues here. First of all, the fact that the SADC Parliamentary Forum has gone around built capacity. It is now incumbent on member parliaments to take it up and begin to run with the various programs, while at the same time begin to mobilize resources in order to do it in country. At the same time, hopefully, the SADC Parliamentary Forum can have another phase for this project. But there is one thing which we must all note. The SADC Parliamentary Forum is a legislative wing, and quite rightly so, has done all it can to get involved in the SRHR by building our capacity to ensure that we are running in tandem with the Sustainable Development Goals 3.7 in particular, and the various commitments that our member countries have met. But in order to achieve all this, for example, laws, they are made principally in our countries by the executive wing. They are the ones who generate these laws. You can stand on top of the mountain, sing left, right, center, dance. If they don't believe in what you are saying, they will never bring that piece of law. So it is important that they get a buy-in, but they are an executive. They are not a part of the parliament. Secondly, even on budgets, most of our countries, maybe 1 or 2, these budgets are actually formulated and crafted by executives. Okay, it's within their discretion and how they look at things, so we can climb the rooftop, sing, jump, somersault, as long as they believe in what they are doing. Sometimes they don't even listen to us. I mean, by nature of politics, the way it is. Also, when it comes to domestication, it's the same thing. If some of these member states don't believe in some of these tenets, there's a model law on key populations. And you have shown us clearly how many countries have done away now with those discriminatory laws or laws that criminalize LGBT, and others still holding on to them. So what am I saying? It is very important as a recommendation that we begin to find ways and means, much as we are doing well as a parliamentary wing or as a legislative wing. We are moving, we've done very well, we've done our part, but we think that our colleagues also should begin to do their part. Yes, we will stand up on the floor of the parliament, remind them, talk to them. In fact, as members of parliament, if we have stood, spoken, advocated, we believe we've done our part. Usually, we believe we have done our part. But the point is, in order for these indicators to come down, they must also do their part. So what do we do to ensure that they also begin to run with a project such as this, so that they also do their part, so that together then we move? So I believe that it is, maybe we should make a recommendation. The SADC PF makes a recommendation to the SADC main body with a full report. This is what MPs across the SADC region believe in. This is what they've done. But we also think that it's high time that the executive themselves are also schooled. They are also schooled in these tenets which you have schooled into the members of parliament, our ministers of health, our ministers of education, our ministers of youth and sports. I don't know at SADC main body level, I believe they must have also their own programs and so on. But I think that for us to make a meaningful change and impact, we must all speak the same language. We are not saying they should now, otherwise it defeats the purpose of separation of powers. But I think that we need to recommend that they must also begin to move with this. In other words, to prioritize the SRHR in their strategic plans and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Okay, this row, we have noted your comments, Honorable. This row, proceed.
Thank you. Let me first start by appreciating the hard work that you were done to produce this report this morning. And I would like to just make a little rectification on the slide impact, where you're talking about the age of access to contraceptives per country. Just to rectify that, for the time being, access to contraceptives in Seychelles is not yet 15 years old. What we meant during the deliberations yesterday, we meant that the issue has already been discussed, it's been tabled, and it's been sent to the executive, but it's not yet law. The age of consent to sex is actually now 15 years old, but the age to access contraceptives without the consent of parents or legal guardians still stands at 18 years old. So just to rectify this for now, until it becomes law and we bridge the gap. Even when we bridge the gap, we're not yet sure if it will be 15 or 16 or 17, or if it will all be 18. This is where we stand now. If you can just amend that, please. Thank you.
Which country is that?
Seychelles.
Oh, Seychelles. Yeah. Okay, noted. This row, we are done. Okay, this row. Fourth row.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mine relates to the slide under impact that speaks to public hearings and the legislation that was passed thereon. I'm still on the issue of the bill in Zimbabwe. It's called Medical Services Amendment Bill. It's an amendment to an act that is already in existence. So there's an omission on amendment, if you can take note of that. And secondly, still on that bill, it hasn't yet been passed. So I'm thinking maybe to capture that sentence correctly, it may read as this led to the passing, this led to either the passing or introduction of some key SRHR legislation, so that it becomes clear that there are some bills that were passed, but there are others that is just been introduced because of the engagement. Because if we lump them as all being passed, we give the impression that they are already acts and they are already being implemented in some countries. I also had an issue on the slide, again, on age of access to contraceptives by countries. if we look at that slide, I saw Eswatini, unless I didn't get it clearly yesterday. The slide is showing that the age in Eswatini for access to contraceptives is 15. But during the presentation, I thought I heard the MP saying it's 12 years. So maybe honorable, okay, she's in agreement with me. So I think maybe there's need for correction on that slide. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. We have noted that the past versus introduction, then the issue that you have just raised, the 15 years versus the 12 years. Okay. Next, we are going down. Yes, this row. Proceed.
Ok, muito obrigada. Bem, eu só queria fazer uma pequena ratificação em relação aos dados de Angola, no que concerne a idade para acesso aos contraceptivos. Atualmente, portanto, a Direção Nacional de Saúde Pública tem uma estratégia nacional de planeamento familiar, não é, que visa, tem como um dos objetivos fundamentais a redução da gravidez precoce. E de acordo a esta estratégia, portanto, desde que o adolescente inicia a vida sexual, se dirige até uma unidade de saúde e apresenta a necessidade de obter contraceptivos para a prevenção da gravidez precoce, ele tem acesso, independentemente, portanto, da sua idade, ela tem acesso. Então, não tem qualquer discriminação de idade, desde que, portanto, faça menção ao profissional que iniciou a vida sexual e precisa se proteger, adolescente tem acesso no âmbito da estratégia nacional de planeamento familiar. Muito obrigada.
Okay, so there is no discrimination, isn't it? You can access services like what you indicated. Okay, thanks for that.
Of course.
Yes, yeah. Your hand was up. Can you please proceed?
Yes, please, thank you. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank Development Data for such a well-articulated and comprehensive presentation. For me, it's an addition and achievement for Lesotho. Yes, as Lesotho, the Parliament of Lesotho also passed the bill on initiation, and this bill prescribes the age of enrollment into initiation school for boys and girls to be 18, which is going to solve issues of a high rate of dropouts or high rate of dropouts at school, in terms of ensuring that children will stay at school, thereby striving for the attainment of SDG 4 for access to quality education. So I just want to go back to what Edna has just said. In terms of saying the bill being passed, the language that she just used, I got a little bit confused. This is what happened with the initiation bill in Lesotho. Lesotho, we have two houses. We have the National Assembly and the Senate. The National Assembly being the lower house and the Senate being the higher house. So normally what happens is that the bill will go to the National Assembly first, and then it will be tabled in Parliament. And then after being tabled in Parliament for the first time, it will then be referred to the relevant parliamentary committee for scrutiny and also for engagement with the public in terms of public hearings. Then after that, the committee will write the report back to the National Assembly, and if the House gives the bill a go ahead, then the bill will be read again in the Parliament for the second time. Then it will be passed to the higher house, which is the Senate. So currently the bill has been passed by the National Assembly. It is currently with the Senate, after which, when it gets the green light, it will go for a royal assent. Then we will be having a law. Thank you.
Okay, well explained. we have noted that, so we'll make sure that whatever you recommended will adjust accordingly. Okay. Next.
Thank you.
I'm still on this row. I will come back to you.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to build up on the two colleagues' contributions. I believe that researchers will probably then do well to sit down with our, not researchers, okay, development data. Will do well to sit down with our SADC peer researchers so that you actually can document the various case studies, because some of them look similar, but they're not so similar. I was looking at the slide on decriminalization of homosexuality. It sounds flowery, and it means different things for the different countries. Because I remember in our group yesterday, I can't remember if it's the colleague from Seychelles or Mauritius, who said that what's decriminalized at this point is MSM, but other components of LGBTIQ+ are still criminalized. So yes, they would have made a bit of traction, but with reservations. So I think the case studies have to capture that and therefore justify that additional works still needs to be done. Okay. So maybe in the form of case studies so that it's a country by country analysis. Then secondly, I also wanted to also then differentiate the impact of the initiative. There's areas where this partnership had direct impacts. And then at some level, it catalyzes things. And it would be good to then reflect, for example, not all work is done directly through this particular grant, but by extension, once an investment is made, there are other sub-components that we should still attribute to the initiative. So I want to say, for example, CSOs, once they gain exposure and access to parliament, they still are then were able to engage at other various levels using other resources. And I think it would be good to capture that so that it's clear that this initiative served to influence directly, but also catalyze some action. The issue of language, I think we should also attribute, I don't know, really capture that. We should not take it for granted that we are able to still maintain the 15 countries, 3 different languages and make progress. Because I have seen in the development sector that we have initiatives that are regarded as SADC initiatives, but they, because of the complexities of language, they then exclude Francophone speaking countries or Portuguese speaking countries, because it's really expensive and complex. I think it has to be documented as, I don't know, impact, that we are still able to bring that together. Catalyst, expanding on the issue of catalyst, the grant saving, the partnership saving as catalyst, it would be good to also capture how civil society is not only, because our parliamentarians say to us, if you come into us, don't come in bits and bobs. We want you to coalesce first, because previously would go this organization in their issue and the other organization in their issue. So coalition building at the national level, but also at the level of SADC, when we needed to engage around SADC model law. And that meant we needed to have our consensus building sessions. So it has built a well-coordinated system within our parliaments, but also by extension within civil society. Thank you. One last one is on timesheets. In Africa, do timesheets really work? I know auditors will ask for them and they can actually penalize us for timesheets. But we are here right now on a Sunday. Is that going into my timesheet? Because timesheets tend to be Monday to Friday. And we also then need to really challenge our auditors, because we receive SMSs from our colleagues at 12 midnight. That does not go into a timesheet. And you can actually be penalized for not completing your timesheet. I think we need to emphasize on deliverables, because you are working on a weekend, but that doesn't go into the timesheet. Whereas an auditor from Europe can just come and say there were no timesheets. It means people were paid, and but they did not do the work. But we know they've done the work. So we also need to engage around decolonizing aid and really justify that we may not have a timesheet, but the work is done, and we can be able to prove it by way of deliverables.
But if it is a compliance issue, definitely you need to to submit a timesheet. Maybe I'm not getting you.
But can I explain? I'm just saying, if we know that the auditors might look for it, to be honest, and I agree with you, and a whole audit can be disqualified on the basis of a timesheet because they, you know how it is. But I think we should also be able to stand our ground, or else it means that our researchers have to also then look into that, because it can actually be a sticking point when the work has been done and then you get an audit that's qualified.
You know, every grant, it comes with contractual obligations and compliance issues. So if it is something that is in the contract, it has to be submitted, okay? So I hear you, but you know, I was grappling the other year with the social development department here, because I was working with the deputy minister here the other year. You know, we were training traditional leaders, you know. Then I said, you know, we are in the communities. We kill goats there, we kill cows, and we cook food, people eat because it's a high volume event. There's no way you can expect a receipt. Okay. As part of your, because I was discussing with the contract manager, as part of the compliance, how do we go about it? You just document that, what you have done. So as evidence. So please, there are certain compliance issues that you have to stick to. So that one, it's a no for me, because grants, they come with certain compliance requirements. The third column, fifth column.
Thank you very much, moderator, for recognizing me to make comments. I have two small ones. The first one is on the slide on conclusion. I think it was also mentioned by my colleague, Chair of Health in Zambia. As members of parliament, we thought that one of the issues to be raised is that we want this project to continue. But in your conclusion, you have just said that it is a good project. We don't believe that is adequate. The second point I wanted to raise is to do with development data. The film behind this study. We shouldn't know from which country this development data is from when reading this report. But I'm afraid I can tell, because most of the examples that you give in your report throughout, most of them Zimbabwe. Other countries in the region are hardly mentioned. Angola, for example. So it looks like maybe people can feel that most of the data or the report is based on people working around Harare, but that's not the case. It's just the way the report has been structured. So I would advise that when you go back, look at the examples and maybe replace some of those with other countries so that the region is well reflected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, these are preliminary, and those recommendations we have taken on board. So we'll try to make sure that it's quite representative of the SADC kind of geographical coverage. So thank you for that. The fifth column, no. Okay, the last column, sorry, row on this side. Yes, the last row.
Thank you very much. I want to start with the last point. Yes, the honorable member has raised. I think someone else also raised it. The sister, You know, men are colorblind. I was nearly going to talk about the color of your blouse. Then I realized I shouldn't go there.
Yeah.
But the sister who is looking at me and the house can see it. I think the one was talking about the finer differences that could be in some of the general conclusions. I think what could really cure this is let's end up with a table that summarizes each country's efforts under the different functions of parliament, because that way we can easily be able to pinpointedly look at each example and be able to align it with the correct context. What would be regrettable is a scenario where we have our report being trashed on the basis of inaccurate information about an example of a given country. So let's have that tabulated format that captures the summary of the efforts. What it does, it gives a region-wide perspective, but it also recognizes the different efforts that have been done, not just in terms of the laws that have been passed or proposed, but even in cases where questions have been asked and debates have taken place within Parliament.
Okay.
The second point I want to raise, I'm a general commentator, whether it's politics or social issues. I've often said Africans, we have what I call borrowed meekness, where we have mortgaged modest. And I've said I will never accept being meek when I don't need to. Tofa from Zimbabwe said, until lions have only historians, tales of hunting will praise the hunter. I looked through the slides on effectiveness. One of the things that I looked out for is the effectiveness of the SADC PF and the SADC PF Secretariat to have managed to conceive a regional project, cascaded down to national parliaments, and get it implemented not just by parliaments, but by stakeholders, almost with uniform passion and with observable results. That for me cannot go unmentioned, although I happen to be part of the Secretariat. And you can allow me to supplement the point, it's fine, so that we flow.
I wanted you to finish first.
Okay, thank you very much. I stand guided.
Yeah, are you done?
Not yet.
Okay.
So when you look at what SADC PF has done at regional level to really give the basis on which the national interventions have been successful. When you look at the footprints of regional parliaments, SADC Parliamentary Forum stands as a parliament that has actually convened meetings and brought together other regional parliaments. IALA, East African Legislative Assembly, the Pan-African Parliament itself, the ECOWAS Parliament. We have even brought on board European parliamentarians. At Pan-African, at IPU level, we have actually mainstreamed No, I'm joking. So they've taken part in model laws, GBV model law, PFM model law, cases of a deliberate step by SADC PF and its secretariat. We have just the last quarter of last year, were on record as having convened the first public hearings for citizens and stakeholders to input into the business of parliament. And if you scan through the issues that came through the public hearings, a lot of them relate to SRHR. So I wanted to make a case, and I hope I've done so, to say, can the effectiveness or the contribution of the Secretariat be recognized in this regard? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. We have noted that. The tabular issue that you suggested, and also, though it's mentioned, but it's not as visible as you would like it to be, but it's there, it's acknowledged in terms of the capacity and the model that was actually developed and cascaded down to national parliaments. But we can do more on that. Thanks. You wanted to comment?
Yes.
Which one?
My contribution was actually just in addition to the comments that have just been made. For me, the report was really good and well done to development data. So the only missing part I was going to talk about was the part that has been said, the role of the SADC PF Secretariat, because all the results we're talking about, all the successes we've talked about have been possible because of their coordination. And if that part is missing, then it will compromise the ability to mobilize resources for continuity, because then it seems like countries were just implementing that, without the support of the Secretariat. But it's because of the role of the Secretariat to bring all these pieces together, ensure the Secretariat, the SRHR researchers are doing their work, and we're all involved in this because of the coordination and ability to ensure that the project is successfully implemented. So that should be the first, success we want to talk about, and all these other pieces then follow. Over.
Okay, thank you. Let me finish off, then I'll come to you. The last row there. I'll come to this first row. Let's try to be very much specific to the issues that you want to raise so that we move forward. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone, all protocol observed. I just have a few points which I'm going to say probably for our development data. Thank you so much for such a detailed report. We appreciate it as well, especially as part of researchers and the Secretariat team. But I just wanted to add a bit, probably that you could help us understand, so that probably by clarifying, it can help us improve if ever we get a chance, probably as to implement the project. On the issue, for example, on the challenges that you cited as well, I can give an example to say on delayed reports, you mentioned it as a challenge. I would appreciate personally to hear the action plan that you can give to us for us to improve on that. So meaning to say on the challenges that you cite, it will be much more appreciated if you give us action plans so that it can be implemented in the next phase. Also on effectiveness and impact as well, to broaden it, like what one colleague just said, probably through even outcome harvesting, that you can give us the success stories, like she said, to say in terms in a form of case studies per country, to show what exactly has been achieved in specific countries, and they are varying because they've got different experiences. Also on what is behavioral changes, I remember one colleague said it would be very crucial for us to really get to understand, especially when it comes to long-term outcomes, for you to specify the behavioral changes in the parliamentarians, especially because those are the ones that we were targeting.
Also, I would appreciate an analysis that comes from each and every outcome. The reason why probably like Mr. Kurasha said, they don't feel the effectiveness has been outlaid for the Secretary General's office is because probably it wasn't done per outcome, per impact, because if you look at the outcomes, they are almost like 9, but if it is clearly stated per outcome, what did we get out of it? Probably per country. I don't know if you'll be having that time to do that, but even if you don't have a time to do for all, but just to give a holistic overview of how outcome 1 was done, then you capture the SG's office because it speaks to that. And then on democracy, you come to outcome 8 and 9 as well, so that at least we know how far we have gone with that, what is lagging. Also, probably you can check on the progress markers to give out the targets that were set, because each progress markers sets up a target and how far it has gone. You may not be able to do it. I know there are so many, like you recommended to say if we can carry on them, but also just to pick a few to highlight how we have gone comparing to where we started and what the project is actually, something that is attributed exactly to the project, how far we have gone from where we started to where we are, so that we can capture some lessons to learn for improvement into our next phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your recommendations noted. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll also be quick. I think first, this being an evaluative study, yeah, you have done good work, our consultants, but I would really like if we do not have, but if we could have a section that actually shows the baseline that was there. I should assume that at the inception of this project, some baseline was done, so that if we'll be talking of impact, it should be measuring it against something. And that has to be clear, which I missed here. It might be there in the full report, but you can consider that. Secondly, I was just cross-checking with my colleagues in Malawi here. There's a technical working group that combines medical personnel in public sector and us CSOs. On the age of quotient that is appearing there, saying 16. I think we can cross-check, we can double-check on that. There's a policy that says all sexually active young people can access contraception. But here, I think what is appearing is 16. So you can actually double check on that. And then in terms of the gap that I've also seen, we can do better and try to see and report on how the SADC PF program has actually contributed towards other policies at regional level, and also some other programs that are there. There's a SADC gender protocol. There's an SRHR strategy. I'm sure we know this, being hosted at the SADC Secretariat 2019 to 2030. We can also maybe try to explain on how the same has been actually attributed to this project. And the other one I think is similar to my colleague here in terms of sequencing. The project actually focused on SRHR, HIV/AIDS, and governance. And then there are, I think, 9 objectives under this objective, under this program. So I think for us to have a detailed follow and like understanding of what has actually changed and what has happened, maybe we could have presented it sequentially per pillar and also per objective, so that we do not miss anything. Actually, these are my observations, but otherwise the report is looking good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've noted your feedback. First, Ro, you can start.
Sure, thank you. I just linked to the previous speakers, also saw a disconnect between the timeline and intermediate results with regard to those 9 indicators. But specifically, I want to give the focus also on the human rights indicators that were not represented
fully in the document. And then the demonstration of inclusivity by championing and advocating for changes in legislation at parliamentary level. And then things around oversight, the accountability role. You know, these are specific indicators that can help us to track change over a period of time. And if we are talking about intermediate results through where we are currently against the baseline, what is really the indicators for change? And if we have not done a baseline, what does the tracking look like with regard to where we are right now? I wanted to also pause and focus on the relationship between the NSPs or the NSFs with regard to the ministries that hold this mandate around SRHR. And for example, in Namibia, we have just ended our interim reviews, and then we are going into the NSP development, which means that there's a lot of epi data on SRHR in these various areas available that does not need to be duplicated or start from scratch. But of course, with regard to the delineation of roles in terms of what does the epi data show us at country level in terms of SRHR can really gives us a glimpse in terms of what does these issues that we are grappling at this level look like around capacity building, resources and budget allocations, oversight and accountability, inclusivity and advocacy, and as well as human rights. There's also strong human rights elements right now or currently incorporated within the NSPs with regard to SRHR. So I wanted us to be mindful about that. And moving on to the next steps of the report, I would like to recommend that at country level, the country teams really look at how they can work with the secretariat and the researchers. How can we strengthen with very specific data provision the report, because we can clearly show the interlinkages with country level analysis and synthesis of data that is already there, strengthen this report. Yeah, so it would be interesting for me to see what the next steps look like in terms of finalization of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next. Not you.
Okay, mine was, sorry.
Wait.
Not me.
Not you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm coming.
Thank you very much. And I'll follow the voices that have given compliments to the report. It's a good start. But there are a few gaps that do need to be filled. I'm actually looking at the theory of change. And when we look at the area of impact, it talks about Parliament advancing SRHR through improved legislation, increased budget allocation, strengthened oversight, and visible representation. I tried to look at the presentation. I think we focused on legislation. I'm trying to imagine, we may have slight differences in our parliaments, but they are almost similar. There are similarities again. I haven't heard any talk of a motion that a member of parliament raised in the last 3 years. We had members of parliament explaining their role and their, maybe we can call it their ceiling in terms of how far they can push for these issues. So I want to believe there are motions that were raised in the last 3-4 years. I can speak for Zambia. And in the evaluation, the written evaluation that we submitted, that information is there.
Okay.
So the mere fact that there were motions that were raised on the floor of the House that speak to SRHR, that's a success.
Yeah.
I want to talk about debates. The mere fact that members of parliament would, I don't know, you can say derail or push a debate biased towards issues of SRHR. And these are policymakers. That's a success. The mere fact that a budget that is looking at something maybe that in the conventional world do not look at SRHR, but the champions could tailor that issue and comb out issues of SRHR. That's a success. I also want to look at issues of the mere fact in the Zambian parliament. I can talk about the Zambian parliament, where a member can, through the speaker, call that a minister should come to the floor of the house and explain through a ministerial statement what is happening concerning maybe early pregnancies. That's a success. And I want to see them in there, because as a researcher, you start feeling defeated that, oh, that I push the member of parliament or members of parliament to drive these issues, and we're not seeing them. I think we're looking for the very big, but we need to look at the timeline. This is 4 years, 8 years, if you want to look at the other phase, but these are successes that we saw as impact. It also talks about representation. I didn't see that. I want to think that in the 10 parliaments that we're implementing, we saw behavioral change of members of parliament at a constituency level. I was giving an example of how members of parliament are going to the technical working group partners and are implementing activities on SRHR right in their constituencies. Some of these examples were given in the evaluation forms. Just to revisit, I can speak for the evaluation form that was submitted for us. Those are the successes that we can speak to. And when we speak to those, we would not speak in tongues, because we are very clear what happened. We are very clear that this is the causality between the work that we were doing and the results that we have seen. And for me, that is impact. Because at a constituency level, if every year you see that annually an event is happening on issues of SRHR, later on we'll be able now to measure and look at the language that we're using of baseline, or see what is happening in that constituency, have the pregnancies reduced. But for me, from a project perspective, I want to think those are successes. So I want to see motions in the report, because from a parliamentary perspective, if you're going to come to a person who works in parliament, if a motion is raised by a member of parliament driven by themselves, that is what we can hold on and say, this is us. Because we also have a mandate as parliament, which is slightly very different actually from the executive. So we may want to also revisit in terms of, have we looked at what is the role of members of parliament and where do they end? Of course, we can influence the law and everything like that, but the actions that have happened in parliament, I feel those need to be captured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we are agreeing on that comment. We are just using different terminologies. Someone called it progress markers. Someone called it minor, is it minor milestones? All those kind of things. What you raised also, like motions, debates. Yeah, we'll most definitely look at that. Thank you for that. Yes. It's your turn now.
Me.
You.
Okay, thank you. Finally. Okay, mine is just a short one and an advice. I think the program has done much on the ground, and reporting, we didn't do justice to the reporting process. So our advice that in the next future, we consider requesting the reports prior to the meeting from the countries, so that when we consolidate them, then we know that we have true reflections from the countries. And then when we come to this space, we know that we're going to look into how far the program has done and what, and then plan forward. I don't know, but it's just the procedure. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Then at the back, then yeah, and that will be the last comment. The 4. You wanna? Okay, you speak last. Yes, in that order. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can start, Madeline. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, honorable members and colleagues. Yeah, some of the things have already been spoken to, but I totally agree with the previous speaker in the first row that we should have had our reports as country specific. Even yesterday when we came, the groupings should have been country specific. and then we focus on our achievements, the challenges, and our recommendations. What I saw yesterday was that while we're in our group as line ministries, agencies, we were kind of like competing to share our experiences, and there wasn't enough time, resulting in the final presentations not being cleaned up. Hence, all these gaps is because the way we followed it through was not systematic, and some information has been missed. So I don't know whether there will be that opportunity. I'm just also thinking that if I was somebody interested in this evaluation, what would I look for? Would I look for all countries, or would I go to a specific country? Or maybe we need to consider how the presentation of the report will be, so that should donors in a particular country want to look at the work which has been done by SADC, PF, and the gaps, it's easy to say this particular country has done this and we can support this way. That's my opinion. In terms of documentation, I totally agree with Talent that we need to document good practices, best practices, good lessons, and the challenges, and map a way forward. That would help. Between now and December, we still have some time. If there's money, Secretary General would appreciate if this could be documented. I am advocating that Zimbabwe has won the bid to host ICASA 2023. So if we could then have a satellite to talk about your work, the success, and also have an exhibition stand to talk to some of these things. Remember, Africa will be in Zimbabwe, and most donors will be in Zimbabwe. So if you want to enhance also in terms of resource mobilization, that would also help. The other things which I also saw in the document, so maybe not to take a lot of time, it will also be good that if we are given the opportunity, forward the corrections to the to data development, so that they capture the issues correctly. Thank you. Sorry. Yesterday I spoke about the issue of including parents in whatever we're doing. And the madam moderator then said she packed it. So I don't know whether it was packed outside and it got wet and it never saw the door, or whether it's irrelevant. I would like to hear about that. Thank you.
It's packed. She will respond. So thank you very much. Yes, in terms of sharing information, the door is still open, because these were just preliminary findings. So would really appreciate if you can share country specific. Yes, we have completed those forms like what you indicated. It's still open. Please share the way how you want it to appear in the document in terms of success stories per country, please. Can I give you timelines? By when can you share? Today is Sunday. By Wednesday, midweek. Success stories from your countries. You can write it nicely the way or how you want it. Okay.
You can just give us another day here. We work and then we go home when we're done.
You can work as country teams. Write your success story so that everyone, that table, the matrix that we referred to earlier, so that everyone is covered. Okay. We don't want to miss anyone. No one should be left behind. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Then the documentation of best practice. I think it was also mentioned yesterday. This is a good practice. So it can be documented and shared at ICASA. Zimbabwe, they've opened already a space for us to come and share this project. So I'm sure the SG is listening to that invitation. It's an invitation already. All right, thank you. Yes, my sister there.
Thank you. In a region that is well known for mismanagement of donor funding, I was thinking that it would be nice to reflect the fact that this particular project, of course, with it should be evidence-based, that there's been very good management of fund. I'm trying to pick the right words. Maybe I should just indicate that we have tried our best and we have done our best to ensure that there's no mismanagement of funds within this project. And it would be nice to reflect that. I don't know if it's part of your terms of reference, because of course there's also the external auditor who also reports to the donor. But in looking at the role of the Secretariat, you may want to look at financial management by the Secretariat, and of course the systems we've put in place for oversight of the Secretariat through the Executive Committee, the Finance Subcommittee, and other organs such as the Standing Committee that deals with this particular project. Thank you.
In terms of, yeah, you raised a good point, but in terms of the good financial management systems, I think that's the role of the auditors. What we can bring out is those issues that we've brought out, that you're managing the program well financially, the value for money issues that we discussed with the finance team in the morning, those kind of things. Yes, we have noted. Yeah, you did very well actually in terms of managing the grant.
So
Yeah,
please
but-
reflect it.
Sorry?
Beyond what the auditor is going to report, it doesn't do any harm for you to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. But we are not, of course, auditing the grant financially. Okay. But we'll mention that, like what you recommended. Any, yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah, the third, the fourth.
Thank you, Program Director. My colleagues have raised this point. It's the point of reporting, being, country specific. I'm for that. I just wanted to add that, how about if you could also upscale or even reduce this information into a scorecard so that all the countries could appear with all the key performance indicators for the project. I'm just saying, adding up to the idea of being country specific, so that we could all appear. Like now we are complaining that you are only making examples with Zimbabwe, Zambia, Seychelles, Eswatini a little bit, Malawi, Mozambique. Mozambique. Did you? Oh, okay, okay. Maybe I'm just suggesting a scorecard. Really, I think it will work for us. It will be more specific with all the KIPs. Thank you.
Yesterday, I think Ibusi raised the issue of comparing. What will happen then when you do a scorecard? I'm just throwing it. It means you are scoring those performance indicators per country. So you see, we're trying to avoid this one red, this one amber, this one green. It might appear like that, yet you wanted the program to be more like one program. We are contributing to one vision of the project, though there are certain success stories coming from the countries. What we'll do then is to, like what I said earlier, if you can then meet as country teams, share, okay, those success stories with us by Wednesday this coming week, so that all countries are represented. I think that was the issue that Honorable also raised. But the scorecard, yes, I don't know, SG and the SADC PF the Secretariat may intervene here, but we didn't want to do more like comparisons or scoring. I'm not sure. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Program Director. I understand that, by, saying country specific, I meant that so that we could all appear. And then you can just make a scorecard for the general, program. That was that was
Okay, so we await terms of reference from SADC PF to do the scorecard. Yeah, all right. Thank you for that, ma'am. Any other reflections before I thank you? Yes. Honorable, yes.
Yes, I just want to support my colleague here. Because if you recall yesterday, I raised this issue. Basically, we are not saying that what we need is some form of comparisons or competition. That's not what we are saying. We would like a tool based on a set number of indicators or themes drawn from the project objectives in the legislative area, in the budget area, in the oversight area, in the representational area, and any other which can be decided upon by the SADC Secretariat team together with our researchers. This too is very necessary as a means of tracking ourselves, benchmarking ourselves with others, and so on and so forth. That is assuming if we are continuing with the project anyway, but whichever way, it is very necessary because right now, you really have to do a lot of work to search around, to read, we heard that this law is now in this country. I mean, I've been battling for a number of months just to pick up the fact that Malawi enacted a law that criminalizes the early marriages. I mean, even when I went to Malawi, the few MPs I met did not know until my colleague here confirmed, and so on. So there should be some broad themes which can help us, members of parliament, to track ourselves, benchmark ourselves with others, to find out why others are lagging behind, for example, so that we can support them.
Okay.
It may not be necessarily for development data, and for it's just coming out as a feeling of the members of parliament.
SG, yeah. Before SG, yes, sorry, you are the last one.
Pois é, muito obrigado. Primeiramente, gostaríamos de inicialmente parabenizar pela apresentação. Pensamos que ela abarcou toda a discussão de ontem e aproveitar primeiramente enaltecer de quanto às questões das recomendações, sobretudo a segunda recomendação, no concernente ao estendermos ali o outcome 2 de governação, no concernente à formação da vertente corrupção. Eu acho que é uma questão bem atual nos nossos países e essa recomendação teve ali muito bem. Depois, iria, sobretudo, naquilo que é facilitar os nossos MPs nas questões finanças públicas, parcerias, gastos, isso acho que está muito bem posto ali. Mas agora, olhando aqui deste lado, eu vejo, tanto na vertente como pesquisador, e eu agora vejo aqui temos parlamentares, todos os outros convidados também, e dá a impressão que todos nós queremos que neste relatório final tivesse ali expresso toda a energia, tempo e emoção que nós dedicamos no projeto. Só que não é possível. Não é possível num relatório final abarcarmos tudo isso. E gostaria aqui de propor, talvez essas questões que poderiam mensurar os KPIs, os indicadores de performance, sobretudo, onde é que nós estávamos, como é que foi o durante e o que é preciso fazermos depois. Eu acredito que seria bom, a SADC temos revistas, se eu estiver enganado, depois pontualizem-me, ou numa revista, ou criarmos uma revista onde depois, a posterior, inclua isso, e todos os parlamentos tenham, porque incluí-lo no relatório final dá a impressão, mesmo eu como pesquisador eu vejo, parece que está aí, está bem posto, mas poderia está mais expresso a emoção e o tempo que nós dedicamos ali, e sobretudo os avanços. Então, é nessa questão. Já quanto aos outros assuntos, já acredito que já fui ultrapassado ali pelos meus colegas e por nós é tudo. Acho que para não estender muito.
Thank you very much. There's another suggestion also from him. Capture, harvest everything, produce newsletters that you can then circulate regionally, globally, nationally. That's another suggestion. Thank you for that. Colleagues, honorables, thank you very much for the feedback. Your comments are quite valid, and we consider each and every comment, feedback, additions, suggestions, recommendations made after the presentation of the preliminary findings. We really appreciate that. So we are going to consider everything that you recommended and see how we can then incorporate in our second draft. Okay, thank you very much. Let me invite my colleague Busisiwe to come before we call upon the SG to share remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ngoni, for handling that session. And I'm just here to just conclude on behalf of Development Data to say thank you so much, particularly for the feedback that you have given us. He has already pointed out that we have taken note of all the points that you have mentioned, and we are going to go through. And let me also hasten to say that even as we are going through the comments, we are also cognizant of the fact that there is a need for us to balance between the regional focus and the national focus. Please bear with us. At times, for some indicators, we will simply give examples. And when we give an example, for instance, of Malawi, it does not necessarily mean that nothing was happening in another country, lest we end up producing national reports instead of a regional report. We will try by all means to make sure that it is not just Zimbabwe appearing in the report. However, I am not being defensive at all. Most of these examples that were cited came from the presentations that you gave us yesterday. Yes, there could have been that seeming bias, but it was never our intention. We are SADC nationals, though we are from Zimbabwe, but we belong to the region. So that aspect will be covered. And in terms of making sure that we don't miss out on some critical details, we are going to work with the SRA researchers to make sure that we capture the different aspects from each country, those specifics that you think should be amplified. Otherwise, if we try to do it now, we are going to have another day here, which might not be possible. But SRHR researchers, please bear with us. We'll need to have some time with you, maybe this afternoon, so that we can agree on how we move on in terms of capturing those specifics. It is very important for us to do that. Otherwise, from Development Data, thank you so much for all the information that you have given us. And we will try by all means to represent your issues adequately. Over to you, Bam. Thank you.
Please, you've done a good job. Just clap and shout for yourselves. Yes, no, thank you very much. Let me say that It's often said that you don't applaud a fish for swimming, but I think development data has done the greatest effort in making sure that they pull this together. And I'll explain this further. Can we please clap for them? Just for your information, I think even as we make these comments, let's go back to the terms of reference that were given to development data for us to be able to appreciate the limitations and what else we can add to this process. Another issue that I needed to bring before you and take into confidence about is the fact that development data was actually recruited on the 31st of December. They were then given a few days to go through, respond through an expression of interest, which meant that they had to quickly survey and put together something simply because governments changed in the country of funding. Whereas they had agreed that they'll overlook the evaluation in view of what was done recently, the new regime said, no, we want an evaluation. We have looked at your proposal for the next phase. We had approved it, but now a directive has come, we're putting it aside. We have to start with the evaluation. So we had no choice. They at least responded. They at least rescued the process. And that is why we need to understand the context within which they were operating. For that, I'd say, please, let's applaud our own development data in the region and not elsewhere. And this is not in any way something that should go to the lens that which we look at the effectiveness or ability. It may not be what they ordinarily do under normal timelines and with what we want them to do. So honorable members and colleagues, we need to applaud the fact that development data has really rushed and done what they can within the short period of time. Having said that, often we must also look at our own capacities in situations like this. It is an evaluation. Not everything is going to look good. And the evaluation can only be as good as what you submit and in the manner in which you submit it. Development data has probably done us so much good by sifting through and making sense. But let's remember that an evaluation will only be as good as you'd like it to be in terms of the strength of your submission. Who should write the stories? That's food for thought. It is not the work of development data. It is the work of development data to say, wow, this story speaks to this component of the results framework. I would not want to give you food for thought without a solution. For that reason, I will extend to all the countries a 2-week period. There's already resources within the project where you are asked to do end of project or closure sessions in each of your countries. Include a journalist or whoever can write and package for your countries and submit lessons learned, which will be an addendum to the evaluation. There's so far that development data can go. The stories cannot come from them. Otherwise, they'll write from the context within which they operate. And I plead with researchers to please go back. The resources are there. The partners are here. Write lessons learned and package your stories in a manner that which you would like the hunter, I don't know which one it is, are you the lion or the hunter, to be able to exemplify. So that's what we need to look at. All these examples, you'll also realize that you can't capture all of them. But there will be those lessons, and I always say the SADC peer fought so hard with donor partners for them to appreciate how to report on indicators for parliaments. You heard what Honorable Kalila said earlier. Development data does not have to sieve those out. It is up to you to sieve those and say, from a parliamentary perspective, For us, we are highlighting this, and this was the tug of war. Even if Parliament ultimately did not do X, this is the quality that was included in terms of the motion, the back and forth, the quality of information. Even if government put this as a response ultimately, but one can basically pick the quality. And I always go back because and I'll give an example which we had as a lab, the safe abortion scenario in Malawi. We had case studies, members spoke. We tried to document something as a secretariat to give that scenario of Malawi and Namibia. Those are the examples that you should package yourself. Find the resources that are required. Find the comms within your partners of the technical working group from the UN for them to package for you and submit those for development data to utilize. I want to underline, you have 2 weeks. You can draw on the resources, package and submit as addendums that will go with the report for development data. Another issue that I'd like to just speak to is, yes, scorecards are important, but scorecards will really be at this rate the responsibility of the monitoring and evaluation officer of the project. And I know that annual reports by Pamela contain some of these examples. It is up to the researchers to draw from the annual report and create a scorecard that they take back to their members and say, let's be ambitious. This is what we see in other countries. The data has been compiled. I'm not sure, honorable members, if you have seen the annual reports from this project. If you have not seen it, it is the work of the researcher in collaboration with the M&E officer. I just want to clear areas so that we don't have expectations beyond what development data can do. Of course, there are areas of improvement, which I agree with that all of you have raised, but I felt I must expunge that which may not be within the terms of reference for us to be able to have expectations that are within the final report that we may find. ICASA satellite station, we are always talking about the fact that these results must be externalized. Researchers have been exposed. They attend, ever since the beginning of the project, they go to every AIDS conference, the latest being the one in Toronto. They have seen how results are framed, how abstracts are written. They've seen that even a poster, and I'll remember a poster in most of these countries, there are posters where we get in these annual reports from countries where members of parliament have put blood, stains of red on their bums to argue for sanitary pads. We have seen so many examples from Eswatini dealing with private sectors in influencing them in terms of how they can support these. Where are they? Development data, did you receive any of these pictures? Because if you have received them, I'd like to see them in the report. So it goes back, the report will only be as good as what you submit. Without going further, colleagues, I want to say that, honorable members, I'm sorry. You have done a good job, researchers. Members of parliament, you have made us proud. You've done a good job. The SADC PF Secretariat, you've done a good job. Our partners have done a good job in showing that they believe in parliament. If we believe in accountability, we have to believe in the role of parliament. The corridors of power are not only those of the executive. The corridors of power also extend to those of parliamentarians. And with these few reflections, I would like to thank you for coming and usher in Dr. Kalila to give us our closing remarks. Thank you very much.
When I was in the executive at one time, if the president spoke, nobody else was allowed to speak after that. Now, of course, the Secretary General has spoken, and by convention, nobody else should have been allowed to speak, but of course, by her own permission, I've been allowed to give a few closing remarks, which I would rather call maybe a vote of thanks on behalf of my colleagues, the members of parliament in the region, and also the 7 others who are here with me this morning. And I'll be very brief because I noticed that we have really stayed too long. I anticipate that I'll be done in probably 2 minutes because I'll take a different approach based on the work that we set ourselves to do here, basically to validate the work of development data. And I will just be asking questions, then you just answer yes or no. Simple. Once those are done, and I'll be done. So colleagues and friends, the first question I have for all of us is whether this project did achieve what it was designed for, yes or no? I want to hear it quite loud. Yes or no? I think the yes have it, if it's in parliament. Second question, did the SADC PF Secretariat deliver on this project? I want to hear your response. Again, it's not clear. Did they deliver, did the SADC PF deliver in implementing this project? So the third question, do we then wish for the project to continue? Okay, so we have yes as an answer to all the first 3 questions. The last question is, do we agree with the findings of development data since we came here to validate? Do we agree, yes or no? It's not loud enough. Yes or no? Yes. With some amendments, of course, right? Okay, so in view of that, I therefore wish that all of us should give a round of applause first to the SADC PF Secretariat for having taken us through this project and implemented it very successfully. And I really want to hear a very big round of applause, especially to our SB. Secondly, another round of applause to our fantastic researchers all around all our countries. Thirdly, another round of applause to civil society organizations who helped us. Then also another round of applause to our partners and funders. Lastly, there's another group which I would like to describe as your babies. They were your babies because all the work that you were doing was basically to nurture them, to teach them how to crawl, to walk, to run, and I'm sure you now want them to fly. And these are our members of parliament, right? So if there are any members of parliament here, please, can you be upstanding so that we see you? And then we give another round of applause to you, if there are any. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm sure by extension to all the members of parliament in the SADC region in whom this project was being delivered. Madam SG, we just want to be truly indebted to you and your team for having built our capacity in the 4 areas of our traditional work. We believe that now we're ready to fly. It's like we started the journey 4 years ago in a boat, and now we are halfway the river. I don't think that it would be prudent that at this point we are abandoned, because if we are abandoned midstream, then we'll sink. But we don't want to sink. We want finally to reach the end. So thank you very much, colleagues. I think that with these few remarks, everything else has been said. I would like now to declare this meeting officially closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As we must go for lunch, but maybe before we go, a quick one. Lorenda, do you want to stand? The beautiful lady and colleague at the back, you see, requires that you submit boarding passes for those who are yet to do so. It is in mutual interest, her interest and yours, that the boarding passes are exchanged, they exchange hands. Wanted to find out from Mrs. Mungandi if there could be any further announcements.
Thank you, Shoneni. Just that lunch is served and that the restaurant will close at 2:30, so we have to go there as soon as we can. Tea will also be served around 15 to 16 hours. We've already paid for it. So those of you who will be around can come up here to have some tea. Travel, you know how to get to the airports. Most of you are leaving tomorrow. Please use the shuttle. You may not be able to, SADC PF staff will not be available to take you to the airport unless if you really require our assistance, and then you can let us know. Thank you so much. Have safe travels, and we pray that we meet again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mungandi. Those who are going to enjoy retail therapy, please do enjoy, and remember Valentine is in the corner. And those who are joining me for the men's conference, we are starting on the 12th and coming back on the 16th. We shall provide more details. Thank you very much, and God bless. Asante sana.
Hello, sorry, just one more announcement. We paid DSA or allowances to cater for meals and incidentals into your bank accounts. So we're not making any cash payments. Into your bank accounts, yes. Those of you who didn't submit your account details, please see us now so that we can process.